Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is Gabriel Marrero, and you're listening to Collapse Talk. Glad you could tune in. I know I've been a little behind schedule with my releases and recordings, dealing with school and work, and, it's like the last stretch of my school year, so I don't think y'all would mind me prioritizing that, but, I feel like it's a good time to record, especially with some things that have been happening a lot, so it's something that we'll touch up on. But yeah, I just wanted to make a quick recording and, just make sense of everything and recap with my own life and just what's happening and then things that are happening around the world, So, tonight is the State of the Union address, which I'm not really listening to. I don't really care because the State of the Union is not doing so well. So, yeah, that's something that I guess we'll highlight later on, but yeah, it's a lot to talk about today, and I'm recording pretty late, which is not really, something that I do usually, but it's expected to be like, storming tomorrow, so I don't mind sleeping in, skipping class, but at least I'll just record and edit and then release this and then just go back to what I was doing. But yeah, there's a lot to talk about, domestically, internationally. There was that earthquake that happened in Turkey and Syria, which is pretty bad, actually. It's like really bad. So I'll be talking about that in a moment or later on in the episode, because I have different segments, discussing different categories of collapse. So that's domestically, there is international, there's also just natural phenomenon. So that's what this show is divided into. Before continue any further, I just want to at least talk about my Patreon, YouTube, other platforms that I post and make content on. Which, as I said, I'm focusing mainly on school and just my own personal life, trying to get my shit together. So, I wish I could kind of record and do my content a little more consistently, and I do need to be more scheduled on that. But hey, I got to make sure I have a roof over my head before I can start making content, right? But hey, that's, what this is all about. Like, I'm not really in a rush to get out there. I mostly just want to focus on building some skills, editing skills and trying to get, that content creation. I don't know how to describe it because I see some people doing that content creation and it's like they're so professional about it. And I'm just like this guy by myself, most of these people, they have like a whole team, like they have a whole management teams, but it's like, who's going to take me on? So, that's something I got to build on. But hey, I just want to focus on my degree first, and then I can start focusing more full time on this stuff. So that's what I always talk on. But, moving into the segments and the subject matters that I'm discussing on this show, at the very least, I want to start domestically. There's just some things that have been happening that, there's some of it has been a bit funny, and other things have just been like, whoa, what's going on? So, first off, I at least want to talk on the elephant in the room, or I should say the spy balloon in the room, is, the Chinese spy balloon fiasco that we just had, which is like pretty funny how everything about that just transpired. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just so like, what is happening? Like, yeah, but this kind of just shows like the yellow peril hysteria that everybody has. So it's like, it's just like, it makes no sense. It doesn't really matter. Like this is like the least like consequential thing in the world. But, people are just, they're in a hysteria, and, anything that's like not normal to them or, well understood, that is what they'll just put all over the media. Like, this is like one of the dumbest stories ever. And it's just like, whatever, a weather balloon that just flew over, or not even, like, it just floated over the U.S. And this isn't even like the first balloon to happen. Like, there was like 4 other incidences under Trump. That so many people were like, well, if Trump were here, he wouldn't allow this he wouldn't just wait for it to go over the ocean. It's just like, no, like this is exactly what happened. They didn't even shoot it down. So it's just like, whatever. This is so dumb. Like, you see some of the videos when they shut it down, like it was around like South Carolina. People are like, yeah, that's my Air Force. Yeah, hell yeah. So dumb. It's just so dumb. It's like, and it's like, it's pretty clearly a weather balloon. Like, that's really just what's happening here. It's just a weather balloon. Even if it was a spy balloon, like, who fucking cares? Like, it's a fucking thing. It's like, you think they need that to spy on us? They have all kinds of agents in here. And then also, like, dude, do you not realize, like, the kind of, like, surveillance state that we have? Like, if you have, like, a smartphone, like, that's already, like, one of the most advanced spy devices you could have. And literally everybody has these. So it's just like, okay, like, who cares? So, spy balloon, whatever. But, yeah, I just want to at least touch up on, it's just an article that NPR wrote, just all about this spy balloon, and also just talking about other incidents that happened about this, where it was so inconsequential that it was like, it barely reached like the higher echelon of like the White House. It was just like, oh, there's a spy balloon or a balloon and whatever. So NPR, they're writing this here and talking about this balloon. They're saying, quote, given the hullabaloo over the Chinese surveillance balloon, you'd think something like this never happened before. But it has, at least 4 other times in recent years. According to U.S. officials, Chinese balloons crossed over the U.S. at least 3 times during the Trump administration and at least 1 other time earlier in the Biden administration. However, the U.S. was not aware of the Chinese incursion at the time, according to the Air Force General Glenn Van Herk, the head of NORAD and the officer responsible for domestic air threats. He told a news conference that the military only learned of the intrusions after they were pieced together by the intelligence community after they happened. Quote, as the NORAD commander, it's my responsibility to detect threats to North America, Van Herk said. Quote, I will tell you that we did not detect those threats, and that's a domain awareness gap that we have to figure out. The intelligence community, after the fact, made us aware of these balloons that were previously approaching North America or transited North America, he added. U.S. officials have not said precisely when or where these balloons incursions took place, or how the intelligence community was able to discover them in retrospect. U.S. officials say those incursions were brief, unlike the most recent one, which lasted for a week. Representative Michael Waltz, a Florida Republican, said defense officials identified the locations of the previous balloon incursions when briefing lawmakers over the weekend. The Washington Post reported that locations included Texas, Florida, Hawaii, and Guam. So it's like Hawaii and Guam is like literally in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So like, who cares? I can understand like at least the mainland, like, oh wow, there's a balloon, but like Guam, Hawaii, like it's literally China's backyard. Like, okay. The Biden administration and the Pentagon say they've offered to brief senior officials in the Trump administration about incursions that took place during Donald Trump's time in office. On social media, Trump described the Chinese balloon incursions during his presidency as, quote, fake disinformation. One of Trump's defense secretaries, Mark Esper, told CNN, quote, I don't ever recall somebody coming into my office or reading anything that the Chinese had a surveillance balloon above the U.S. So yeah, they were saying how it was mainly like they couldn't detect it, and then in retrospect, they're like, oh, there was actually a balloon here. But it's like I don't really care, and like they're proposing now even more like budget increases of the defense spending for like anti-balloon technology, because they had an F-22 shoot down the air balloon, the surveillance balloon, which they're saying that is the first air-to-air kill for an F-22. But there is also like some discrepancies about the missile, because usually these missiles are like heat-seeking. This is from what I'm understanding. So it like locks onto a heat signature, and of course, as a balloon doesn't have like an afterburner, so it was kind of more difficult to lock on there. But hey, they shot it down, which if you're gonna rely on something for the U.S. to do, it's gonna be to shoot down anything in their airspace. So it's pretty funny, It's just funny because like it's like 2001, like the Space Odyssey, where it's like the monkeys, they see the monolith and they're like, oh, oh! Like that's kind of like the U.S. It's just like, oh my God, there's a balloon. It's just so dumb. It's so dumb. Yeah, oh my God. It's just like, who cares? Like, it was probably just a weather balloon. There was like other theories talking how this weather balloon is probably following the polar vortex, this unstable jet stream. So it's probably just what happened. It was in the jet stream, and then there was an Arctic blast, like during the same time that this balloon hit the U.S. airspace, and then it just floated along. So yeah, it's just like all this hysteria about China, spying on us, and then like we don't have like all kinds of secret agents in China right now, and just all over the world. It's so ridiculous. Yeah. Oh well. So that is what we had there, and you're seeing this we're seeing this increase in this like rhetoric, this like saber rattling against China. Like there's also other reports talking how like we might be in a war with China by 2025, and it's more just like, are you just trying to like, groom us into this sort of thing? Trying to create consent, because now it's like we're gonna go to war to China because like a balloon drifted into our airspace. Like it's ridiculous. But you got Republicans that like any excuse that they can to go to war with China. Like that's what they want. So it's kind of ridiculous. With China, and just again this like increase in like anti like socialist hysteria that we're kind of going through, this Red Scare. Like now that I'm thinking about it, like this very much reminds me of like the Sputnik launch, where like people were just so scared of Sputnik, and it's literally just like this ball in space, just like just sending out a signal like beep 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 beep. Like that's all it was doing. And in the 50s, everybody was so scared. Oh my God, Sputnik! Like so. Yeah, we got this Red Scare going on, and this manufacturing of consent for an escalation with China. However it's going to happen, that's kind of what they're gearing up for. And yeah, we have, just also domestically, an increase in this anti-socialist, anti-communist hysteria. Just I can already speak from my own personal experiences. Like there are like a pretty sizable portion of my family that like kind of don't want to talk to me because I'm openly socialist and communist, and it's like, what the hell, So this is how pervasive this like hysteria is. It's just like whatever. But we have here that's this proposal or this House bill that was, it's not really like a bill. It was more just like a memo that they're like putting out, like, oh yes, and we don't support communism or socialism. So it's like kind of dumb. But we have here with MSNBC talking about this bill or memorandum that was voted on in the House, and it was this op-ed, this opinion columnist Zishan Alim. He is speaking on how this was bait, and how because this was voted on like almost unanimously by the Republicans, and then there was about 109 Democrats who also voted with this, and they kind of just fell for it was basically a trick. So yeah, this is what they'll touch up on here. House Republicans introduced a measure this week calling for Congress to condemn the horrors of socialism. It was bait, and most Democrats took it. The 109 Democrats who joined every Republican in the House to vote in favor of the non-binding resolution lent their voice to the initiative, but their support will have no tangible effect on policy. Still, it is a victory for the GOP, which has succeeded in a strategic effort to jam a wedge into the Democratic caucus, further stigmatizing the left and cooking up cynical ads for the next election cycle. The resolution states that, quote, socialist ideology necessitates a concentration of power that has time and time again collapsed into communist regimes, totalitarian rule, and brutal dictatorships. Its specific condemnations of the horrors of socialism focus primarily on the brutal communist regimes of the 20th century authoritarians like Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong. But it deliberately makes no distinction between those regimes and more contemporary leftist projects with commitments to democracy. For example, in the resolution, Stalin is puzzlingly grouped together with late Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez. Stalin was infamous for horrific autocratic repressions, which included mass imprisonments and executions. By contrast, Chavez operated as the popular head of an affluent modern democracy in Latin America, and he did a great deal of transformative economic good for his country, with its interpretation of socialist principles, even while under siege from the U.S. This isn't to defend, like he clarifies, this isn't to defend everything Chavez did, but to say he committed some of the greatest crimes in history is absurd. More broadly speaking, the purpose of the resolution is to eliminate any difference between 20th century authoritarian communism and the rising popularity of democratic socialism in the U.S. today. By painting everything associated with socialist ideology with one broad brush, the resolution seeks to put Mao's Cultural Revolution in the same bucket as Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders calls for a political revolution, which really means a mass mobilization on behalf of social democratic demands like Medicare for all and free childcare. The effect is to smear the small but growing democratic socialist bloc in Congress and vital organizations like the Democratic Socialists of America that are positively transforming political possibility in America, which is unfortunate because on issues such as healthcare, student debt, wealth inequality, and climate change, socialist advocacy and activism has been pushing mainstream politics in the right direction in recent years. It's short-sighted for Democrats to bandwagon with Republican efforts to vilify socialists. One clue as to why: the GOP's refusal to accept Democratic Republican Mark Pocan's amendment to the resolution clarifying that opposition to socialism in the U.S. does not include programs like Medicare and Social Security. Pocan's read on why the GOP objected is useful here. So this is Mark Pocan speaking. Quote, more and more members on the other side of the aisle are calling for cuts to Social Security and Medicare, and many have referred to these programs as socialism throughout their existence. The other night in the Rules Committee, they showed their cards. Republicans refused an amendment to declare that Social Security and Medicare is not socialism. This resolution is little about intelligent discourse and everything to do about laying the groundwork to cut Social Security and Medicare. And back to the article, Pocan is right. The GOP has long been in business of attacking any kind of government social service as socialism, and this theatrical bid to rally lawmakers to condemn socialism is part of that project. By exploiting Democrats' pathological fear of being perceived as radicals, Republicans are once again forcing Democrats to take a defensive posture on the question of social spending. And this is why the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Representative Pramila Jayapal of Washington, says she's counseled her caucus to vote against the resolution because, quote, however you vote on this bill, they're going to use it against you, so it doesn't really matter, end quote. Right, and then also here, just wrapping up, the silver lining here is that more than 80 Democrats did see through the GOP's tactic and voted against the resolution, and another 14 voted present, meaning they declined to take an official position on it. Such an outcome would have seemed impossible a decade ago when socialism still carried more of a stigma. But Democrats still have a long way to go. The Democratic establishment is still largely hostile to even incrementalist left-wing principles, and it must learn that theatrical left punching will do little to improve its fate. Ultimately, embracing its left wing will yield better results for the American people than living in constant fear of the association with the S word. So, yeah, man, we're seeing this push against socialism because, people are just like, oh, no, I'm not radical. And really, these people, they just don't have any principles whatsoever. So it's just like, oh, well, no, I'm not one of those people. It's just they have no principles. They're fence sitters. That's what they are. But, it's just that, this next election cycle is going to fucking suck. 2024 is going to be horrible. Okay? Because I already know that I'm going to be dealing with people talking about how radical the Democrats are. And it's they're not even remotely radical. I really wish the Democrats were as radical as people pretend they are. Because it's just they're so disconnected. It's just, dude. Seriously, this society is very much be turning into a very right-wing, anti-socialist, communist, political atmosphere. And we're and it's so funny that they're talking about removing Social Security and Medicare, and the majority of these anti-left-wing, anti-socialist, anti-woke voter base is really old, where they're about to retire and get these benefits. So it's just like, again, man, boomers are the worst. They really are. It's just so bad. It's really bad that they resort to this sort of thinking, and it's just like no, see, the Democrats are too. They're not good for business. Like, yeah, you have one side that's like openly Christian nationalist that is literally gearing up for a second Holocaust. But hey, at least they're good for the economy. So that's why I'm going to vote for them. Like that's like how the a lot of normal people think. And I say normal, it's just like normies, right? No, it's just like most regular people who don't pay attention to anything. All they think about is what's good for the economy. So who cares if one side is literally calling about, we should execute doctors who give gender-affirming care, or doctors who perform abortions. They don't even think about that, because that side's good for the businesses, and that's who I'm going to vote for. It's just it's ridiculous. Hey, but it's pretty much all downhill from here. So it's just we're here for the ride, right? And then you have this anti-socialist political atmosphere that's getting more and more hard line, especially in social environments. If I openly speak that I'm a communist and socialist, oh man, that's going to cause a lot of issues. It's just it's ridiculous. The things that I talk about aren't even radical. It's just the most basic human rights. And that's suddenly a radical position. That's how lost we are right now. Wow. So, yeah, that's something that we'll have to watch as it unfolds. Because as I said, next few years are going to get pretty rough politically. And, the next election cycle could be a lot worse, than 2020 somehow. It's going to get bad. But hey, let's hope for the best. And, we have this, political atmosphere, anti-socialist atmosphere. And then we also have the growing police occupation that's just becoming more and more violent. And, of course, we have another killing. There's just, great things are happening here. And, we have to follow this story of Tyree Nichols, who was murdered in Memphis. I've seen clips of the beating, where he got beat to death, which is hard to watch. There's only so many videos of cops killing people. It's just I try to not get shocked and surprised anymore, but this was shocking. I'm just wow. At the very least, the police department did move on this pretty quickly. They're already charging. They charged initially 5 officers, and then with this article here, I'll touch upon a 6th officer that was involved. The distinction here, however, is the first 5 were all black, and then this 6th one, who was fired, and he's being, I believe he's being prosecuted as well. He was white, and he was later, and it's there's not really much of a press release or anything. It's just, at this point, you keep seeing stuff like this, and then still, when you talk to suburban people, boomers, still, no, we gotta have the police, and we have to give them their funding, and it's just and they keep killing people, and it doesn't really matter to me that they still arrested the cops involved. Tyree's dead. Okay, he's dead. So it doesn't matter that that they got arrested. He's dead. He's gone. So it's not going to fix anything. And it's just, it keeps happening. It keeps happening, and eventually there's going to be a point where, we see something like the George Floyd killing, the murder there, which a lot of conservatives still believe the officers involved were innocent, and then the officers here as well, they believe that they're innocent. Oh no, he should have just listened, and he did. They told him to go on the ground, and they start beating him. And he doesn't even have he's not even a criminal. Not that it matters. Dude, the point of police is to apprehend the suspect, and keep them alive to face prosecution. But no, instead, if you disobey me, then that gives them the right to kill you. It's just like, yeah, it's crazy. So, we're talking about this from the AP News and just all the different demonstrations that have been happening. And so AP News is talking how there's this 6th officer that was involved that was fired and facing prosecution. So just reading from AP News. So a 6th Memphis officer was fired Friday after an internal police investigation showed he violated multiple department policies in the violent arrest of Tyree Nichols, including rules surrounding the deployment of a stun gun, officials said. Preston Hemphill has been suspended as he was investigated for his role in the January 7th arrest of Nichols, who died in a hospital 3 days later. 5 Memphis officers have also been fired and charged with second-degree murder in Nichols' death. Nichols was beaten after police stopped him for what they said was a traffic violation. Video released after pressure from Nichols' family shows officers holding him down, repeatedly punching him, kicking him, striking him with a baton as he screamed for his mother. The officers who have been fired and charged are black, as was Nichols. Hemphill is white. One other officer has been suspended but has not been identified. Hemphill was the 3rd officer at the traffic stop that preceded the arrest, but was not at the location where Nichols was beaten after he ran away. On body camera footage from the initial stop, Hemphill is heard saying that he used a stun gun against Nichols and declared, quote, "I hope they stomp his ass," end quote. Along with breaking rules regarding the use of a stun gun, Hemphill was also fired for violations of personal conduct and truthfulness, police said in a statement. Police announced Hemphill's suspension on January 30th, but they said Hemphill was actually suspended shortly after the arrest. Memphis police spokeswoman Karen Rudolph said information about Hemphill's suspension was not immediately released because Hemphill had not been fired. The department generally gives out information about an officer's punishment only after a department investigation into misconduct ends, Rudolph said. After the suspension was announced, lawyers for Nichols' family questioned why the department did not disclose Hemphill's discipline earlier. Quote, "We have asked from the beginning that the Memphis Police Department be transparent with the family and the community. This news seems to indicate that they haven't risen to the occasion," attorneys Ben Crump and Anthony Romanucci said in a statement. Quote, "It certainly begs the question why the white officer involved in this brutal attack was shielded and protected from the public eye and to date from sufficient discipline and accountability." Also Friday, Tennessee board suspended the emergency medical technician licenses of 2 former Memphis Fire Department employees for failing to render critical care. The suspensions of EMT Robert Long and advanced EMT Jamichael Sandridge builds on efforts by authorities to hold officers and other first responders accountable for the violence against Nichols. The Justice Department has also opened a civil rights probe into the attack that was captured on video. Yeah, so they're also talking about other people and other officials involved. So EMT, they're saying they didn't give them the most efficient care. It's just all around this is just a bad situation. And, still, we can have all these arrests and all these, people getting prosecuted, but still it's just he's dead. And that can't be reversed. And this is going to keep happening. These police are going to keep killing people. And then, we're going to talk about in a minute this other police shooting that happened in Atlanta concerning Cop City. There are demonstrations that are happening there. But, they're just these cops, they keep killing people. And because these suburbanites, that's what I call them now. Because that's what they are. These suburbanites who don't really have to deal with this threat, they just keep supporting them and they keep doubling down on them, with these Blue Lives flags and all these, stickers and such. And it's just all, it's just authoritarianism and people can't help themselves. They just, anything that's authority is immediately respected, even though that authority can literally just ruin their day, just kill them just on a whim. It's crazy, It's a lot of people that I speak with, they truly believe the police are there to protect them. They truly believe that. And, my apprehensions, they're just, it's in your head. You don't have nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, I go about my day, and if I see a cop, they're kind of looking at me for any excuse to, stop me. It's just, I don't really have positive of course, like I don't do shit, so I'm not really causing trouble. But still, it's just like the cop isn't a friendly person to be around. It's just like in general, like these are not happy people. These are not good people. Okay, the only thing they offer to society is the fact that they're thugs. They're thugs. They're gangsters. That's all they are. And as we'll touch upon in this, Atlanta, demonstrations against this site, this training facility that the cops are building. They're planning to bulldoze a forest to build up this cop city, this training facility to train it basically to, kill protesters and, urban warfare sort of stuff. Like this is truly like a military facility that they're trying to build. And like they've already killed a protester, which I'll touch upon. But yeah, and they're just doubling down on it. And then like now, we'll also, talk about these charges that they're making, because like they're basically charging these forest defenders with domestic terrorism charges. So if you sit in a tree and if you, try to protest against the police bulldozing a forest, and you're just sitting in a tree, first off, like they've already demonstrated that they're willing to kill you. And secondly, if they do catch you and arrest you, you're a terrorist because you sat in the tree and you got in the way of a bulldozer or some shit. Like this is fucking ridiculous. So, and still like, oh no, the cops, no, the cops, we have to protect the cops. So fucking ridiculous. But so yeah, talking from CBS News, just talking about this protester that was killed. Police shot Manuel Esteban Baez Terán, an environmental activist protesting the building of a training facility near Atlanta dubbed Cop City at least 13 times, according to the results of a private autopsy shared by the activist's family lawyers on Friday. Police officers have said Terán, who was known as Tortuguita, was killed on January 18th after the activist shot and wounded a state trooper during an operation to clear protesters near the training facilities in Atlanta's forested outskirts. Quote, Manny was a kind person who helped anyone who needed it. He was a pacifist. They say that he shot an officer. I do not believe it, said his mother, Belkis Terán, in a press release. Quote, I do not understand why they will not even privately explain to us what happened to our child. The family said that they have contacted the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the agency investigating the shooting, but haven't received a response. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation has said the shooting was not recorded on body cameras. Police said the gun used in the shooting against the troopers was purchased by Terán in September of 2020. On Wednesday, January 25th, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation announced that a special prosecutor will be assigned to review the case, but critics are calling for an independent investigation. Quote, any evidence, if it is only an audio recording, will help the family piece together what happened on the morning of January 18th, said family attorney Brian Spears. This information is critical and is being withheld. In a statement on its website, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation said it is, quote, not releasing any videos currently because agents are continuing to conduct key interviews and want to maintain the integrity of the investigation. We ask for your patience while we go through the process needed to complete the investigation. At that time, our case file will be given to a special prosecutor, end quote. Investigations typically take about 60 to 90 days to complete, police said. The investigators are reviewing the actions of all individuals connected to the incident, including Terán and law enforcement. Police are reviewing body camera footage, witness statements, and forensic evidence. Family lawyers plan to release additional findings on the private autopsy and demand access to the investigation during a press conference scheduled for Monday. So yeah, they're saying these things that Terán shot at them, which I don't believe at all. I don't believe for a second, because that kind of goes against the whole principle of this protest, which is it's like they're just a non-violent demonstration, just sit in a tree. So the fact that they said that he shot at them doesn't make any sense. That's I'm pretty sure these protesters are smarter not to bring guns, because then that gives the cops a reason to kill them all. So yeah, that that is something that is currently escalating. Actually, I was reading actually today that they're doing like a sweep, like they're doing like a SWAT sweep of the forest. So like these cops are like and like they're, it's literally like they're going to war. Like these cops are fucking soldiers. They're thugs, okay? And it's just like, no, we gotta keep giving them more money, and we gotta build the city up. Like, the general public doesn't want this to happen, but of course, like, the city officials are just gonna make it happen, because it's not about protecting the public. It's about protecting their own institutions, protecting the police, because they got their own thing going on, because they don't represent the people. So, and again, it's Georgia. It's like Georgia is like a really bad state to live in. Just, yeah, sorry if you live in Georgia. But yeah, but I live in Texas, and we have our own issues, and which I'll touch up on in a second. But yeah, they're talking about in Georgia just this idea of prosecuting these protesters with domestic terrorist charges. So these forest defenders, sitting in trees, once they get arrested, they're domestic terrorists. And also the protesters who are, who were demonstrating in response to this police killing, they Molotov cocktailed a police car, busted some windows. Those have also been prosecuted for domestic terrorist charges. So, this is what's happening now, where any kind of like pushback against the authorities is now going to be domestic terrorists. Like, that's what's going to happen. That's what it's escalating to. And of course, that's what, people are just going to, defend that, because they just blindly respect authority, because authority is just the way it is. Yeah, man. It's really hard. It's really hard speaking to people who don't follow these things, and it's just like, oh, well, yeah, they just don't think about it. If it doesn't directly affect them, then they don't really see the problem. When I talk a lot on this queer hysteria, this pretty much like, talking openly about like a queer genocide, trans genocide, and I already know, like, if I talk about this in a more general public setting, like, someone's going to be like, well, you're not queer, right? So you have nothing to worry about. It's just like, you really think they're going to stop there? Like, come on, dude. It's just like, this anti-socialist political atmosphere that's growing, becoming more mainstream. Like, who was the first political group targeted in Nazi Germany? Hello? It's just like, but hey, they don't teach that history. In fact, like, a lot of the historical courses in our education system now are being kind of brushed aside, being revised, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So there's a lot of things that are like not looking good, and like it really looks like it's gonna get worse. Like, this is what happens. Like, this is the new normal. We don't see it coming, but it just slowly starts building up. And then eventually, like, it gets to a point where you no longer recognize it. And you're like, how do we get to this point? Of course, the people who don't think about these subject matters and who don't really concern themselves with, this rise in fascism and authoritarianism, to them, it's just another Tuesday, because they only care about the economy. Oh, the economy's doing great. Oh, well, you see, we did good with this quarter. So that's the only thing that matters. Like, that's all they think about. So, yeah, just talking there, but that was happening in Georgia. Well, first it was Tennessee, talking about this killing, Tyree Nichols, and then also this Cop City protest in Georgia. And yeah, there's going to be something else next month. There's going to be another killing, some other cop, just killing somebody on camera. And then again, you're going to see the same responses. Oh, he just followed orders. Oh, well, you see, he already had a history of violence. So, the cops, they're a bit jumping. It's just, yeah, just any excuse to defend the cops. And that's it. That's the only thing that matters. So, yeah, that's great, state of affairs that we got going on. But yeah, so that was what's happening in Georgia and Tennessee. Now, this isn't exactly cop related, but this is also something that's been happening around my area, Texas. I was thinking about putting this in the like natural events, like weather events segment, but then it kind of seemed more, a domestic issue that I should touch up on, particularly with our energy grid, because last week we had an ice storm that came through. Now, the ice storm was more central Texas, like Austin area primarily, that got affected badly. But my area, we just got a lot of rain. Like this is a time of year where it's cold and wet, so it's not really my favorite time of year. But I would take this over, the summertime where it's like, muggy and swampy, and it's like the heat is up to like 112. Like, God, it just sucks whenever it's that hot. But yeah, so I'm kind of like savoring these cooler temperatures as much as I can, because yeah, I mean, it gets hot. It gets really hot. So, and again, in the summertime, there's also energy demands, and like that is another subject matter. But today, at least, I want to talk about this ice storm that hit in Austin. And I think at the height of it, at least in Austin, it was up to like 100,000 people that lost power. So there was a lot of people that lost power that were affected by this, and still, like, they're still out of power because, like, there's so much damage. The ice, like, it weighs down the trees. So all these trees, they collapse, and then they knock out, the transformers, power lines. There's all sorts of things that short circuit. And like, I had like one friend, I was talking with her about her situation. She was lucky not to lose it, but she had some other friends that had lost power and they had to stay with her. So yeah, this is just something that's like, you're minding your business, and then now the power's out. And I was lucky in my area in Huntsville not to have had power outages. So I'm not too like, what I've realized, I've actually done some research, and the power grid here in Huntsville is actually separate from the Texas ERCOT grid. So that is something that's a bit of a relief, which kind of explains why in that 2021 storm, in fact, like, we're starting to reach like the 2-year anniversary of that now, I realized. But yeah, the 2021 storm, it knocked out our grid in Huntsville, but we got it back in like 48 hours. So it was not that long, it still sucked, because like there was a point where I almost had frostbite in my hands, but I was prepared, and at the very least those 48 hours I was comfortable, but I was prepared to last longer. But I'm glad that it didn't. I'm glad that we had that power back. But some people were without it for a week, and I'm just thinking, like, man, like in Houston, like if something like this happened where the power grid got knocked out, like, this would be a very bad situation, because this was happening for like almost a week now, and like they're already showing like images of people going in HEB dumpsters to get food because all their food went bad. And like, this is what's like, you see how quickly, like, just like, it's not like complete chaos, but like you already see like the fabric starting to like break, like the seams already starting to stretch. Like, that's how quickly it is, man. And when I see stuff like this, it just really vindicates my prepping mindset, because it's just like, look how quickly people are digging through dumpsters to get food because their food went bad, because we don't have a sufficient power grid. And again, people get weird with me. Oh, you're a prepper. It's like, yeah, because do you not see what's happening? It's just, yeah, after a certain point, you just do you. So, yeah. So talking at least with this Austin energy recovery, the energy grid, and just about all the different people out of power. So I'm reading from KVUE, ABC, like this is an Austin local station. So this is what they're reporting. In a statement on Saturday morning, Austin Energy said restoring some remaining power outages may be a multi-day effort. The utility provider said crews restored power to nearly 51,000 more customers from 5 p.m. Friday to 9 a.m. Saturday. It said a total of 256,307 customers had their power restored since the beginning of the winter storm earlier this week. So, yeah. So 250,000 customers were without power. Like, that is like that, and it was just like that. Just a very like basically like the ice was like basically like a day, and already like almost like 500,000 people were without power. Like, this is kind of crazy. Let's see. Quote, In large part, this progress was possible because as temperatures climbed, fewer trees and limbs fell on power lines, Austin Energy said. But as crews worked on restoring the remaining power outages, more than 74,000 customers, or 14% of the service area, as of 12:45 p.m. Saturday, quote, restoring power to a single circuit may be a multi-day effort. This is because equipment may be in hard-to-reach areas like a green belt, or it may be buried under extremely heavy debris, Austin Energy said on Saturday. Quote, one example of this is a 500-foot steel communications tower that crashed down on a 3-phase distribution line, 4 spans of wires and 5 power poles. Repairing this site will take several days. Around 400 total crew members were working to get customers back online. The number includes line workers, tree trimmers, and other personnel from Austin Energy and neighboring utilities. That number was unchanged since Friday morning, but in an update on Saturday afternoon, Austin Energy said additional mutual aid arrived around 12 p.m. And yeah, they're just getting this stuff together to, get the equipment back up, and all these different locations being damaged from the ice, trees, like a lot of trees actually fell. They're saying like more trees fell in this storm than the 2021 storm, because like this is ice, the 2021 storm was snow, but this was ice, and it definitely weighs down trees. So it's a good thing that we didn't get that here. We had a freeze in January, and there was some ice. Like I was seeing like those icicles, like actually that's how cold it was getting. But there was no like precipitation, thankfully. So yeah, so I got to keep an eye out, for other Arctic blasts coming through, because we've been getting them periodically for the last couple of weeks. But yeah, we're not really getting anything like, we get some in the 30s, like some mornings are in the 30s. But again, there's like no rain, there's no snow or anything. So it's just cold, and that's it, which, hey, it's easy to handle. As long as there's no like rain or any ice, the cold, I don't mind, So that's just something to keep in mind. And there's a lot to, watch out for. We have another storm like system passing through. Like tonight, actually, it's going to be kind of raining in the morning. And honestly, like, I tried to be more consistent with my classes, but, if it's like literally like raining, because I have classes in like 9, sometimes like 11, like if it's raining hard, I'm not going to class. So, that's just, I don't mind sleeping in. But yeah, man. Yeah, we got this stuff happening with the outages and the Texas power grid. And man, like, it's just really embarrassing that it's just like how quickly the grid system could just snap like that, And again, people are like digging through their trash, like, and these are the people that don't prep. These are the people that don't even pay attention. They probably were thinking, oh, there's gonna be some ice, and it's like, again, people don't really see these things. Again, it's not their fault, because like if your food goes bad, then you gotta do whatever you can. But it just really shows how fragile things can be. It's very lucky that we were able to have some emergency services, get stuff out, and I'm sure they had like distribution centers, food distribution centers. But there's gonna come a time where like there's gonna be a true like weather disaster where like the actual like support grid, the support system and supply lines to make sure people are taken care of, like even that would be affected. And then what? That's when it gets scary. You can have like a weather disaster and still have like emergency responses, and have some semblance of like the logistics and supply lines in place to make sure that people are taken care of. But when even that starts getting affected by the weather, then that's where problems arise. So, hopefully we don't see that anytime soon, but it's going to happen, Like I'm thinking back on Hurricane Harvey and like all the challenges that the response crews were having, all the National Guard, first responders were having, because like there's just flooding everywhere, and like it wasn't ending. Like it was like literally like a whole week of just rain and nonstop, and like that's really a bad situation to be in. So hopefully we never have to deal with that anytime soon. So, it's just interesting how like each season comes around, like there's like a different weather disaster to anticipate. So like it's like the winter, you have to worry about a freeze or a blizzard, some sort of like ice storm coming through. And then the springtime comes around, you have to worry about tornadoes. That's something that I'm going to have to start paying attention to now in this springtime. And then the summertime, hurricanes. And then the fall, maybe a hurricane that might, come up again. I'm not really too sure what happens in the fall. That's kind of like, I don't really see too many weather disasters that time of year. But yeah, it's mainly just like whenever these major changes occur, temperature changes and these fronts moving in, that's usually what causes these weather events, especially along like, I live more in the coastal area, so it gets really humid out here. So you have that humidity, and then you have these Arctic fronts moving through where, that change, because, cold air is very dry, and then you have this very warm, wet air, and then once those clash together, that's going to cause like really dramatic weather events. And you can read all kinds of weather reports on like Texas being like the number one like state that's going to be affected. Like outside of Florida, Texas is going to be like the number one state affected by weather disasters, in the future, climate change. So that's something to keep in mind. That's something to keep in mind. And I've talked earlier about like, I guess, laying my roots down here, but then it's like, if I want to lay my roots here, I gotta make sure that I'm ready for anything. So that's something that's going to be fun to look forward to. But yeah, that's, Texas and our grid system here. And I want to also talk about this other incident. So it's not necessarily weather related. It's a kind of a, so it's this like train derailment disaster that's unfolding in East Palestine, Ohio. So, this is something that I feel like is going to be a recurring, incident, recurring emergency situation where there's going to be a train disaster. And the thing is like these train disasters, they're carrying all kinds of chemicals, and it's basically like, just a mini nuke waiting to happen. Like they're really like scared that this thing could explode and like just completely decimate this neighborhood. This like little small town of like 5,000 people. They're telling everybody, get out, because what they're doing is that they're like releasing the chemicals to make sure that it doesn't at least like stay in the tank, because the tanks are burning, and it kind of becomes like a pressure cooker and it explodes. So what they're trying to do is at least release the chemicals, so if it's going to burn, at the very least it'll burn on the ground, or not inside the tank where all that pressure is going to build up. Yeah, it's like really bad that's happening. It's and there's like air pollution. There's all this like smoke. It's like a really big like burning just column of black smoke, and this is something that I believe is going to keep happening. We're going to have these train disasters happening, and this effectively, because we had these rail demonstrations, labor demonstrations, where these people are being overworked and they have like barely any sick days, and they were about to start a rail strike. Of course, Congress intervened, because if there was a rail strike, then like they would have gotten the National Guard involved, and it would have been a whole different situation. So yeah, these train derailments, these disasters, they're going to become, I believe, more apparent. It's going to become more of a pattern, because again, these people are being overworked, and we're just going to see stuff like this happen again and again. So at the very least, I want to talk at least just on what's happening in this village of East Palestine. Is what it's called, and this is something that CNN is reporting on. So reading from CNN, residents of the Ohio village of East Palestine remain unable to return home after a controlled release Monday of a toxic chemical from cars that were part of a train derailment 3 days ago, Mayor Trent Conaway said during an evening news conference. An operation to drain vinyl chloride, a chemical that officials said was unstable and could explode from 5 Norfolk Southern rail cars began just after 4:30 p.m. Scott Deutsch of Norfolk Southern had earlier said small shaped charges would be used to blow a hole in each rail car. The vinyl chloride would then spill into a trench where flares would ignite and burn it away. As of 7 p.m., the flames were reduced and a small fire continues in the pit. Deutsch said at the news conference, quote, "It is still an ongoing event, so we just ask everybody to stay out." The mayor said, "We have to wait for the fires to die down." An evacuation zone of 1 mile around the train's crash site remains in place. Conaway said, "Authorities will reassess the zone Tuesday morning." He added, quote, "We really don't have a time frame right now for the return of the residents," he said. A team from the Environmental Protection Agency will monitor the air and water quality in the area, officials said. The remaining fires will go out on their own and won't be extinguished by crews, Deutsch said. Prior to the controlled release Monday, officials worried the 5 derailed cars carrying vinyl chloride might hurl toxic fumes in the air and shoot deadly shrapnel as far away as a mile. One rail car in particular had been a focus of concern because its malfunctioning safety valves had prevented the car from releasing the vinyl chloride inside. A Columbiana County emergency management official and a Norfolk Southern spokesperson told CNN earlier Monday. Ahead of the controlled release, the evacuation zone surrounding the fiery derailment site expanded to 2 states, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine said. DeWine and Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro had ordered evacuations for a 1 mile by 2 mile area surrounding East Palestine, a village of about 5,000 people near the Pennsylvania border. This followed evacuations that took place just after the massive inferno began Friday night. According to East Palestine resident Eric Whitting, police knocked on his door about an hour after the derailment and said the family had to evacuate. They told me, quote, "They told me they didn't know anything yet, but that they just needed us to evacuate," Whitting said. Yeah, so this is pretty scary. It's a pretty scary situation of like a derailment, because like when these trains derail, like it's a serious crisis, especially in populated areas. And they're trying to ensure that the chemicals are released and burned away, because if it explodes, it's going to be like a nuke, like it's going to be a big explosion. So they're telling people to leave. And of course, this is like a small like town of 5,000 people. They're out in the country, so like it's going to be somebody like, no government going to tell me to leave. Like it's just, and they're already like saying like, if you don't leave, then you're going to have a misdemeanor charge, and if you have children, then we're going to get endangerment of children like charges. So it's just like, they're just making the evacuations. But like we're going to see this a lot, like where there's going to be more and more of these derailments and like disasters happening where there's just going to be like an infrastructure just collapse or something like that. Of course they're going to have to investigate this and see what happened. Of course I'm not saying that anybody's to blame for this, but this is going to keep happening. And usually I'm a big fan of trains. Of course I support trains in terms of like moving logistics and such. So this sort of thing is just kind of, it's going to happen. There's going to be derailments and it's going to be accidents. It's one thing, however, when you kind of like remove all the safety measures in place, especially when you're overworking people and then stuff like this happens. It's more like, this is something else kind of preventable. But again, like there hasn't been an investigation yet, so we don't really know as to why this happened, but we can speculate. That's all I do. I just speculate, like, oh, well, what happened? So, yeah, we'll of course have to wait till their official reviews are out, and it's just some more infrastructure, issues that we'll be dealing with moving down, because things are bad. So that's just the domestic infrastructure decline that we're experiencing, and that's just something that we'll have to follow up on. I wanted to at least talk about, because I was talking earlier about just history courses being revised or education system being attacked by these Republicans. They're so concerned about the woke agenda is infiltrating our school system, and it's literally just like the most basic history like studies. So, also following on CNN, this story of Florida, good old Florida, they're rejecting this AP course of African American Studies. They're alleging that this African American course, history course, touches up on Black Lives Matters, the movement, Black Panther movement. It's just like anything that's like remotely like Black liberation, alleging that it's Marxist socialist agenda, which I mean, like, it's the Black Panther Party. Like, yeah, it's inherently Marxist and Maoist, but they don't want that taught in schools because, God forbid, Black people in schools or just children in general actually learn about the history of Black America, the very real subjugation and terror that they've been experiencing, and and this is like the pushback that's happening. So, just reading on CNN, Florida rejected a proposed advanced placement course focused on African American studies because it included studies of topics like movement for Black lives, Black feminism, and reparations, according to a list of concerns provided to CNN on Friday by Republican Governor Ron DeSantis' office. The one-page document prepared by the Florida Department of Education also questions the inclusion of certain Black authors and historians whose writings touch on critical race theory and Black communism. For example, the state objects to the inclusion of writings by Robin D.G. Kelley, a professor of American history at UCLA, who, quote, warns that simply establishing safe spaces and renaming campus buildings does nothing to overthrow capitalism, according to the document. The state also said the course framework for the study of reparations, the argument to compensate Black Americans for slavery and other historical atrocities and oppressive acts, includes, quote, no critical perspective or balancing opinion in this lesson, end quote. Quote, all points and resources in the study advocate for reparations, the document said. The state based its assertion of the course on an 81-page syllabus from February 2022. According to the list of concerns, their objections cover 6 topics of study, all in the 4th and final unit when students study movements and debates. A previous draft version of the concerns sent to CNN by DeSantis' office included an objection to the study of the Black Power movement and the Black Panther Party. The draft version asserted that, quote, the Black Panther Party was based on the ideology of Marxism-Leninism. The goal of the Black Panther Party was to fundamentally change or overthrow the American government, end quote. However, in an updated version of the state's concerns, the reference to the Black Panther Party were removed and replaced with an objection to the study of Black queer studies. They were like, oh no, it's not it's just like that made it, that's actually worse that they're attacking Black queer studies. Oh my God, man, I hate these people so much. The State Department of Education on January 12th informed the College Board, the organization that oversees the advanced placement program, that the course violated state law and rejected its inclusion in Florida schools. The course, which is the first of its kind, was first introduced in the fall as a pilot in about 60 schools and will be offered nationwide starting in the 2024-25 school year. It was developed over the last decade and is intended to be a multidisciplinary study of the African American diaspora that includes literature, the arts, sciences, politics, and geography. So this is just like a further trend that conservatives have, where like anything that's like any sort of basic like history studies that doesn't like immediately like celebrate the objective like white supremacy of this country's history, like, is immediately just woke and, oh no, it's just it's critical race theory. It's like the more they talk about it, it's like critical race theory isn't even like a thing. It's just basic history. But they only want the history that celebrates their ancestors. I don't want to feel ashamed about my heritage. And it's like, well, you should be. So, yeah. So, I mean, like, dude, like, it's just so dumb. Yeah. It's just so dumb. And, one thing I'm glad about, with this history subjects that I'm studying, I'm having a history degree, history major, is like we have this one history seminar course where you have to effectively write on. It's basically writing a dissertation. So we're doing like different discussions, and later down in the semester, I'm going to have to write like a 10-page report, which I kind of don't look forward to, but hey, this is part of the deal with a history degree. So it's interesting because we are focusing a lot on like, it's mainly like Texas, like Southwestern history. So it's kind of like Texas is in this weird place where it's like the deep South, racial terror of, Black people. That definitely happened. But then also there's that racial terror of the Mexicans living in these lands. And it's very interesting reading about this because I specifically read a report on the lynchings of Mexican Americans. And it's kind of fascinating because like in a lot of ways it was more dangerous to be a Mexican statistically than it was to be a Black person in like the Reconstruction Jim Crow era. Again, it's mainly due to like lower population sizes. So it's like per capita, like Mexicans faced more lynchings and violence than Black Americans because there's just a population discrepancy. But it's just interesting reading about this because like it's just this history of like in the U.S. of the Anglos, these Protestant Anglos, just moving west, conquering the lands and like just subjugating the people who are already living there. And now we're getting to a point where it's like these white folks, these Anglos, are just like, it's just projection. Like they know what they did to the people of these lands. They know exactly what they did. And that's why they're so scared of other groups moving in here. And that's why you hear these rhetoric of like white genocide. Oh no. And like now like anything that's like woke is now anti-white. Like I saw this one tweet where like they these people just they lose it over the smallest things. So like for those of you who know the Disney Channel, they did a reboot of the Proud Family, that animated show with the Black family and such. It brings back childhood memories, but it's like this new series, they're touching up on very serious subject matters, which like the original series also did. So like they're just pretending like, oh no, this is new. Like they should just go back to the way it was, and like nothing has really changed. But if you're gonna have a show centered around Black experiences, and not just Black experience, just like non-white experiences, you're gonna have to touch up on racism and discrimination. It's just the fact of the matter. And honestly though, like whenever I see these white folks complaining, oh, they're just bringing this white guilt back up. It's like, okay, well now that you're saying and complaining about this, now we're going to do it more because you keep complaining about it. Because you just want people to forget. Like you would prefer people to forget about it and subscribe to this white supremacist idealistic outlook on U.S. history that everything is perfect and great and everything is sunshine and roses and this is the land of opportunity, when it's like you see this very real history where like it's not even like something that's like after the fact that we've like conjured up. Like you just read like basic primary sources and like you'll read about them talking about Mexicans and like, oh, they're depraved and they're a devious group, or they'll talk about how like there's literally like some documents that I've been reading where like they're just straight up saying, no, these aren't human. Like, yeah, no, white people are superior species, and Mexicans and Black people and natives, they're just cognitively inferior and they are just not civilized. Like that's what they were saying, and it's still very much like the outlook that people have today. So it's just ridiculous. And yeah, man, it's just anything that doesn't remotely celebrate the U.S. U.S. number one. It's like, oh, now it's woke. So hey, it is what it is. So that's just like the domestic situation happening. Great things are happening here in the U.S., but hey, that's what I'll leave off on because already there's just other things happening around the world. There's like crazy things happening in the U.S., but we're not the only place where we have like crazy right-wing conservative people. Namely, wanted to touch up on Brazil and this January 6th attempt that they had, although it was January 8th. So Yeah, it's very different, but also like kind of very similar. Like they basically this insurrection of Brazilian, right wing idiots. They effectively stormed their version of the Capitol. The but it's not really like the same. Like it's similar, but it's not the same because the White House attack. I shouldn't say the White House attack. The Capitol Hill attack, January 6th. They actually had the senators and all these people, like the vice president. They were actually in the building, and like there was actually, I mean, it would have failed regardless because these people are idiots. But still a very real possibility that they could have gotten their hands on somebody, some senator or some representative, and that would have ended horribly. But here in Brazil, like they already did their transition of power. It was just like everybody was gone, so there was nobody there. So they were literally just like breaking in like the Supreme Court buildings, the Congress buildings, just all the major government buildings, and it's just so crazy. It's just crazy to watch everything, but also really stupid because these people are fucking idiots. And just touching up on Reuters and what they're talking about this, because it's so funny watching like different videos of this because these people, they're openly fascist because they secretly they openly want the military to take over. I mean, again, like Bolsonaro, who's currently like seeking shelter in Florida. Like Bolsonaro was a military officer in the military dictatorship during like the 60s and the 80s, and he said, like, there's like multiple videos you can find of him where he's like, yeah, they didn't go far enough. So like these people want to go back to an actual military dictatorship. This is, so great things are happening. So yeah, but just talking on Reuters and touching up on what's been happening here. So this is what they're reporting on. So with a Brazil flag draped around his neck and his feet propped up on a dark wooden table, Samuel Faria leaned back in the Brazilian Senate president's ceremonial chair, which he had just commandeered, and surveyed the chaos on the lawn outside. Quote, "It's kicking off out there," he said, watching from his Senate perch as fellow yellow and green-clad supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro ransacked government buildings in Brasilia on January 8th. He then thanked his patrons. Quote, "I've got money in the bank," he said, as he live-streamed Brazil's worst political crisis in a generation. Quote, "Thanks to you, dear patriots, who helped us. Lots of friends supporting us, or lots of friends sponsoring us with PIX. A wildly successful government-run payment system, PIX, has become a key financial pillar underpinning Bolsonaro's election denial movement, allowing his most ardent fans to crowdfund their alternative media outlets and far-right demonstrations culminating in the chaos of January 8th. But now, as authorities seek to identify the funders of the Brasilia riots, the same tool that helped to forge the insurgent movement will be used by investigators to take it down. Around a dozen police and anti-money laundering officials told Reuters, quote, "We have a secure and consistent line of investigation focused on tracking financial movements undertaken via PIX," said a senior federal police officer involved in the sprawling nationwide investigation, speaking on condition of anonymity to discuss the ongoing probe. Quote, "The financier's time is up." Supreme Court Justice Alexandra de Moraes, who is leading the criminal probe into the insurrection, and Justice Minister Flavio Dino have said they plan to prioritize uncovering the financiers of the riot, who will likely face similar charges to the 1,398 arrested rioters. They are accused of crimes including terrorism and attempting a coup. A federal cop working the Supreme Court probe said initial investigations suggested the insurrection was financed by farmers and trucking magnates from Bolsonaro's strongholds in the interior of Brazil. However, police had yet to identify a big fish, said the officer, who spoke on condition of anonymity. Quote, "Nobody of relevance yet." The federal police press office declined to comment about an active investigation. Faria, the Senate invader from the city of Socorro, in Sao Paulo state did not respond to a request for comment. Launched in November 2020 and run by Brazil's central bank, Pix is free of charge for individuals, allowing them to instantly transfer money to others via online banking apps. And yeah, continuing on with the Pix, but let me see here what else they're talking. Right, okay, right. So here's also just because this is like it's like Venmo. It's like Venmo for like right-wing nut jobs in Brazil. So this is kind of funny. Well, it's not funny, the whole insurrection invading the capital, but still, like, it's just like we're living in crazy times. Right. Pro-Bolsonaro influencers advertise their Pix keys on YouTube videos and Instagram live streams, asking followers to send instant contributions to their bank accounts. Enzo Leonardo Susan, a conservative YouTuber known as Enzu, said most of his income still comes from ads, but Pix contributions now represented up to 20% of revenue. Quote, "I always use crowdfunding to improve the quality of the channel," said Susan, who was targeted in 2020 by a Supreme Court probe into alleged fake news, but has never been charged. Pix has become ubiquitous thanks to the fact it is free and instantaneous. Its reach has been a boon to fundraisers who can easily receive transfers from across Brazil. Since President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva won the October 30th election, Susan had noticed Pix becoming widely used by the hardcore Bolsonaro supporters agitating for a coup and encampments outside military bases across Brazil, including army headquarters in Brasilia. Many of them had paused their lives and were using social media to solicit contributions from like-minded patriots. Quote, "Many influencers and some everyday folks, they are financed themselves exclusively via Pix," Susan said. So this is kind of they're saying this is more of like a crowd-funded political movement. Honestly, insurrectionist attitudes, wanting to overthrow the democratically elected president, da Silva, or Lula, I should say, and it's just ridiculous. They're saying like Lula is like outright like a communist, like he's a social democrat at best, and I know he has his problems, like many leftists have talked about the issues that he has. So that's certainly something that is important that will be touched up on. But hey, at least Bolsonaro is out, so that is there's some light, and it's really nice to see this rise in like left wing governments and political movements. They're not completely left wing, but they're left of center, so that's at least something good. There's moments where I'm thinking like, man, like, is there a way that I can move to one of these Latin American countries? Because they're looking like they're doing well, Yeah, who knows? That might be something down the line, later in life. And it wouldn't be too hard for me to move because at least I understand Spanish, not completely, but it would be an easier transition than say like going to like, I don't know, Japan or something like that. Yeah, it's just, I don't know where I would even move to, but it's just like, I know there may come a point where like I will just like leave America entirely if I could. If I could get in the position to go, then I would, but that's a different conversation. So yeah, that's happening in Brazil, and they're having a fun time there, with this right-wing insurrection. People like they're like literally calling for a coup. Like they're saying, we want the military to overthrow the government. This is so funny. Crazy. And then like you have this happening, and then you still have Twitter followers and Twitter influencers talking about, oh, this is a scary time in Brazil. A communist dictatorship has taken over, and it's like literally like a general election. Like he won 2 rounds of elections, so like. Yeah, like this guy, he's democratically elected, and I don't know, man. And there's other stuff that's happening in Peru, and that Peru, they're having their protests, and this is really escalating. Actually, it's getting pretty bad. I didn't pull up an article this time around, but like they're killing protesters out there, and this is something that's not touched up on. And of course, it's very clearly a U.S.-backed coup, and this is going to keep happening throughout Latin America, because there's already talks about Brazil and Argentina, they're making talks about creating their own like currency so that they're not so reliant on U.S. Dependence and economic dependence. This is gonna be a pattern now where you're gonna see places like Africa as well. They're gonna start like having their own economic reforms so that way they can have their own stability and their own independence from the U.S. and that's gonna cause problems. Like I can already see because there's all kinds of reports coming out from defense officials talking about we're concerned about China encroaching in Africa and Latin America, and it's just they're very clearly escalating a confrontation because the U.S. empire is in decline and most of the world doesn't want to do business with the U.S. There's all kinds of places now where in Africa or in Latin America that people are walking around with either Chinese or Russian flags because they want China and Russia to intervene because the U.S. doesn't look out for their interests. The U.S. just props up these oligarchs who are going to exploit the people, who are going to send off all the resources and all the economic funds and there's no freedom and democracy. It's just crazy. It's funny too because I'm talking. I shouldn't say I'm talking. I'm taking a World War II history class, and so this very clearly they're talking about Nazi Germany, the rise of Nazi Germany, but then they're also talking about the USSR, and it's just so funny how they're talking about oh man, see the USSR they condone violence and it's just it's so crazy. And meanwhile you have the British Empire that basically at the height of its strength, after World War One, it's still weakened, but the height of its strength, controlling vast land in Africa, in India, right? There's the Bengal famine. They talk about hundreds of millions killed under communism, but then they don't understand the death toll of the European colonialism. The British Empire, without a doubt, has killed billions of people. Just without a doubt, just all the lands that they have owned over the last 200 years, they have killed so many people. But and then they don't make that connection that the British Empire was an explicitly capitalist empire. But hey, communism so bad, ooh, so evil. So yeah, it's ridiculous, but whatever. And just it's a World War II history class, and I like studying World War II history. I shouldn't because you're studying this, and of course it's a very dark history and dark period in human history. But then you have these other people in the class that's their only personality trait. Oh, I study World War II, and dude, this one guy in class, he will not shut the fuck up. Oh my god. The teacher will be talking and she'll be making her lecture, and then he just makes a little comment, and I just want to just say shut the fuck up and let her talk because she's the teacher. You don't think anybody else here knows the subject matter, but they're letting her talk because she's the teacher. It's just god damn it. Some people are very annoying. I love history, but man, there's some history buffs that are very annoying. They just don't know how to shut up. Anyway, I kind of got off track, but yeah, I'm going to talk at least some other demonstrations. So this is not, because, the demonstrations that I'm talking about in Brazil, this is a right-wing reaction, uprising. So this is more of a protest within France, anti-austerity measures, there's a lot of left-wing movements here that are happening. And it's mainly protests against this proposal of raising the retirement age by 2 years, so from 62 to 64, in France. And these people are coming out in droves, and France has been protesting for any minor issue. France will get out in the street and they'll start busting windows and burning cars. And in a lot of ways I gotta respect it. I really do, because they don't fuck around, and we really need that energy here. However, the police and military will kill us all. So that's the problem. So it's for starters, Americans are just very comfortable. I mean, even myself, I don't really want to get involved in the street like that, because I cannot risk getting arrested and then like losing my job and then basically have my life ruined. Like, some of these people who get arrested out in these streets, at least they have some support system for them. I have nothing. So if I get arrested and get some charges for like public disturbance, like that is going to be, pretty much like, that would pretty much ruin my life, because, so that's what I have to look out for, which is why I do the podcast. At the very least, I can talk about the subject matters, So, talking on BBC about these protests that are happening in France, and this is pretty much like a big movement of workers. They're also talking about how unions of like electric energy workers, like they're cutting power to like different government officials, or it's good to see. It's good to see the solidarity. It gives me hope when I see this sort of thing. But again, France also has a very like right-wing element as well. So it's like, like the yellow vest movement, in a lot of ways is left-wing, but it's also right-wing too. So it's more just like a populist sort of uprising. And this is kind of what's happening here. So, talking on this protest in France. So, France has seen a second wave of protests and strikes against President Emmanuel Macron. Plans to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. Anti-government cortèges were as loud and as big, if not louder and bigger, than on the first day of action. The Interior Ministry said more than 1.27 million people protested, a higher figure than 12 days ago. 8 key unions took part in the strike, which disrupted schools, public transports, and oil refineries. The CGT trade union said 500,000 protesters had gathered in Paris alone, although authorities put the number at 87,000, and the union put the total number across France as high as 2.8 million. But for all the mass mobilization, it is still far from clear if the protesters can force Mr. Macron to back down. The government can withstand any number of, quote, days of action like this so long as they take place along the predictable and orderly lines that they have so far. Mr. Macron's government is pushing ahead with its pension age reforms in the face of opinion polls that suggest 2/3 of voters are opposed to the changes, which begin their passage through the National Assembly next week. Without a majority in Parliament, the government will have to rely on the right-wing Republicans for support as much as the ruling party's own MPs. Hours before the main protest began in the Place d'Italie in central Paris, thousands of marchers turned out in Toulouse. Man, I should know these things. Marseille and Nice in the south, and Saint-Nazaire, Nantes, and Rennes. Man, I don't know these names, but Rennes in the west. A reported 11,000 police were deployed to cover the demonstrations taking place in more than 200 towns and cities. Some skirmishes reported at the end of the Paris route in Place Vauban, and 30 people were arrested. The Interior Minister praised police for their handling of the protests. Quote, Mr. Macron is certain to lose. Far-left leader Jean-Luc Mélenchon told the reporters in Marseille, quote, nobody wants his reforms, and the more the days go by, the greater the opposition to them, end quote. Karima, 62, held up a placard in Paris highlighting that the government's plans hurt women far more than men. Quote, lots of us already have broken careers and will have to work even longer than men in order to have a full pension. There was severe disruption to transport, with 3/4 of trains outside Paris cancelled and only 2 driverless metro lines operating normally in Paris. Large crowds were reported on one of the main overground lines in the capital. Transport strikes no longer have the capacity to throttle France like they used to. The proportion of public sector workers on strike was actually lower on Tuesday than on the 19th of January, a sign presumably of a fear of lost wages. The CGT union said at least 3/4 of workers had walked out at the big Total Energies oil refinery and fuel depots, although the company said the number was far lower. Power plants reported reduced production after workers went on strike at the main electricity company EDF. One of the main teachers' unions said some 55% of secondary school teachers had walked out, although the government said the figure was just over a quarter. High school pupils staged protests outside some schools, and students said they would occupy Sciences Po University in Paris in support of the strikers. Quote, a lot of French people feel that working is more and more painful. It's not that they don't want to work, they don't want to work in these conditions. Sciences Po political scientist Bruno Pallier told the BBC. There was also evidence that while raising the state pension age wasn't a unifying call to arms, people were turning out for wider reasons too. A male nurse said he was there because conditions in public hospitals have become intolerable. Teachers are angry at the state of schools, and Mr. Macron, the boogeyman, was pilloried in cartoon and effigy. Yeah, so, people don't like Macron. Macron is not doing so hot, but, it's like people on the left and the right hate him. It's a very interesting situation in France, and more power to them because they don't mess around. And we really need this energy out here in the US, but it's going to take a lot more because, people want their Applebee's and they want their Chili's, and, that's really all you got to get people to do. Again, like you saw what happened in this lockdown. People were losing their fucking minds because they couldn't eat out. Just losing their minds. And this is why, I have really little hope for this country. It's because people just got their head up their ass, No, I just want to go out. I don't like staying inside. And now we have this public health crisis of long COVID because people thought that COVID is, it's just a mild headache, and you just have a mild flu, and now we're gonna open ourselves up to an even worse pandemic, and a lot more people are gonna die because we let this COVID pandemic just get out of hand because people wanted to go to Arby's. It's crazy, man. Crazy times we're living in. So at least in France and other places, people have self-respect for themselves and they are willing to fight for their benefits. And I mean, it's as you said, this is a very unpopular proposal, but these government parties and the parliament and such, they're still going to push it through. So it's very clearly not the will of the people. It's just, this is just what's happening. So, fun times. So at least, what we're talking about, so these different government movements are happening, and, just internationally, there's different proposals, economic woes that are happening, and, as they said, it was initially the pension, but then there's other things that are piling up too. And people are protesting for, the schools, and people are protesting because of the hospitals, and people are just being worked to death. And then now they're going to raise the age up, so they're going to work for longer. It's the people are fed up. So, we're going to at least touch up on that later on. So, so there's that's happening with political protests, and abroad. And we're also having to deal with just greater escalations, a threat of nuclear escalation. We're living in very unprecedented times, and this is the greatest threat of nuclear holocaust ever. Again, people just living their normal lives. I mean, there's not much that they can do, but still, it's just this is what's going to happen. We're going to live our normal lives, and then something's going to pop off, and it could be either a conventional conflict in Europe and possibly with China, or just straight up nukes from the get-go. And it's going to be bad. So what we're at least focusing on this is a recent press release coming from the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. So this is basically the Doomsday Clock. And they're setting it at 90 seconds to midnight. So this is the closest it's ever been to midnight. Not really good times that we're living in, but I'm at least going to read this press release that they're saying. So this is from January 24th when they did this. So the Doomsday Clock was set at 90 seconds to midnight, due largely, but not exclusively, to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and increased risk of nuclear escalation. The new clock time is also influenced by coming threats posed by the climate crisis and the breakdown of global norms and institutions needed to mitigate risks associated with advancing technologies and biological threats such as COVID-19. Rachel Bronson, PhD, President and CEO, Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, said, quote, "We are living in a time of unprecedented danger, and Doomsday Clock time reflects this reality. 90 seconds to midnight is the closest the clock has been set to midnight, and it's a decision our experts do not take lightly. The U.S. government, its NATO allies, and Ukraine have a multitude of channels for dialogue. We urge leaders to explore all of them to their fullest ability to turn back the clock." End quote. The Doomsday Clock's time is set by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists Science and Security Board and the support of the Bulletin's board of sponsors, which includes 10 Nobel laureates. Previously, the Doomsday Clock has been set at 100 seconds to midnight since 2020. Doomsday Clock statement explains that, quote, "Russia's war on Ukraine has raised profound questions about how states interact, eroding norms of international conduct that underpin successful responses to a variety of global risks. And worst of all, Russia's thinly veiled threats to use nuclear weapons remind the world that the escalation of the conflict by accident, intention, or miscalculation is a terrible risk. The possibility that the conflict could spin out of anybody's control remains high. Russia has also brought its war to the Chernobyl and Zaporizhzhia nuclear reactor sites, violating international protocols and risking widespread release of radioactive materials. Efforts by the International Atomic Energy Agency to secure these plants so far have been rebuffed." End quote. The statement has been translated into Ukrainian and Russian. Mary Robinson, chair of the Elders and former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, said, quote, "Doomsday Clock is sounding an alarm for the whole of humanity. We are on the brink of a precipice, but our leaders are not acting at sufficient speed or scale to secure a peaceful and livable planet. From cutting carbon emissions to strengthening arms control treaties and investing in pandemic preparedness, we know what needs to be done. The science is clear, but the political will is lacking. This must change in 2023 if we are to avert catastrophe. We are facing multiple existential crises. Leaders need a crisis mindset." End quote. Ban Ki-moon, deputy chair of the Elders and former Secretary General of the United Nations, said, quote, 3 years ago, I helped unveil the Doomsday Clock when its hands were last moved. Today we're even closer to midnight, showing how much more perilous our world has become in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, extreme weather events, and Russia's outrageous war on Ukraine. Leaders did not heed the Doomsday Clock's warning in 2020. We will all continue to pay the price. In 2023, it is vital for all our sakes that they act. And so they're just talking about other, different threats that are happening. So it's very interesting that it's not just nukes. Okay, of course we have a very real threat of nuclear escalation, but they're including as well the climate disasters that have been happening. Climate emission or carbon emissions not being cut, and as well with that, COVID-19 and how this COVID-19 response that we've had is really it doesn't give me hope for the next pandemic, because there's going to be a next pandemic, and we'll touch up on some other biothreats that are happening. So there's going to be another pandemic, and it will definitely be worse than COVID-19, primarily because people's immune systems are now weakened. So people are dropping because of the flu, and there's, of course, a threat now of the avian flu that possibly mutating and infecting humans, and that is going to be really bad. It's going to be so bad. Like Last of Us, has been coming out on TV, which is a great show, great game, great show. But it's giving me those vibes where it's like there's going to be something else. And then before you know it, there's going to be that breakdown of society like we experienced last time. That lockdown was very sudden. And it was very chilling to see how quickly things just kind of not completely fell apart, but got strained, and doesn't give me much hope for the next round of pandemics that are going to happen, that are definitely going to kill far more people. It's crazy. At least I just want to touch up on what they're highlighting here. And so there's that. So there's the climate, there's nuclear weapons, there's the pandemic preparedness. They're also touching up on disinformation, which is not something that is considered like a doomsday sort of danger, but it's still very real. Let me see at least what they're saying here. So, quote, on the disinformation front, there was some good news. For the most part, the American electorate rejected election deniers in 2022, and in France, President Emmanuel Macron overcame a historic challenge from his country's far-right candidate, Marine Le Pen. Meanwhile, the Biden administration continued its efforts to increase the role of scientists in informing public policy. On the other hand, cyber-enabled disinformation continues unabated, and the United States political opposition to a, quote, disinformation governance board proposed by the Department of Homeland Security was grounded in willful misrepresentation and the politics of personal destruction, but non-substantive and misleading as its messages were. The opposition succeeded in causing the department to withdraw its proposal. These types of attacks are hardly new, but are emblematic of corruption in the information environment. Inside Russia, meanwhile, government control of the information ecosystem has blocked the wide dissemination of truthful information about the Ukraine war. Chinese use of surveillance technology has continued apace in Xinjiang. As we stated last year, the extensive use of surveillance technologies has disturbing implications for human rights and poses a distinct threat to civil society. Russian President Vladimir Putin has also shredded norms of behavior in space, publicly threatening to use anti-satellite weapon against U.S. Starlink satellites, arguing that they are not merely a commercial system but a military one as well. Ukraine has made use of Starlink in its conflict with Russia. So, yeah, there's that aspect as well. So there's a multitude of factors. It's not just the threat of nuclear escalation. So there's the nuclear escalation. There is the climate emergencies and crises that are happening. Carbon emissions, the threat of pandemics, and then disinformation, which has serious implications for just public stability, internal stability. So, yeah, that's their Doomsday Clock, 90 seconds to midnight, which, that kind of sounds like a band name. Honestly, like that sounds like a really cool band name, but in this situation, it's not so fun. So, yeah. But yeah, man, that's just what's happening, and this escalation in the Ukraine war. They're talking how this is unprecedented, and there's like no diplomatic talks whatsoever. Like we're sending tanks now. Like this is something that's continuing to escalate. Like if you make talks about, hey, we should have a peace talk, we should make a truce because this is really getting bad. Oh no, well, you see, Russia, they have to leave. This war can end. Russia has to leave. But it's like, hey, has Ukraine been able to like dislodge Russia? Because like you can't just tell Russia to leave if there's like this is how diplomacy works. Okay, not that I'm a diplomat, but this is from my understanding of it. If you're going to tell Russia you have to leave these lands and give them back to Ukraine, you actually need to be in a position to enforce that. So when you're saying to them, hey, please give back that land to Ukraine, it's like, how are you going to compel me to do that? Because you already sanctioned me, and you're not going to intervene with military force, because then that's World War III and nuclear holocaust. So how are you going to enforce that? So it's just like, again, man, it's just like, this is what I mean, where I'm saying like, just give it. Just give them the Donbass, give them the lands that they already occupy, because Ukraine isn't going to get it back. They can't. They're not in a position, and the only way that they can do it is if we give them more support, more weapons, more tanks, and we're just going to get further and further entrenched into this conflict. I mean, and again, like you will hear now people unironically saying, yes, we should go to war with Russia. Like, this is insane. Like, seriously. This is insane. And if you're the person who's saying maybe we should have peace, and not like have World War III, because that's going to be really bad and a lot of people are going to die, like now you're a Russia apologist and you're a Russia sympathizer. And it's just like, no, I just don't want to die in Ukraine. I don't want to die for Ukraine. I don't fucking give a shit about Ukraine. I don't care. Not that the people in this situation are dealing with a really like horrible situation. And I don't want people to be stuck in this. I don't want people to be bombed and having to deal with like missiles and drone strikes. But dude, like, we gotta have a peace talk sometime, because this is too much, man. Like, dude, even like these like Defense Department, like these contractors, like RAND, research and development, they're saying we need to de-escalate this conflict because like this is gonna get bad, and this is not a war that can be won without NATO intervention. But then that's World War III. So it's crazy. I mean, I've seen videos now of like Zelensky now. This guy's going off the deep end. You know, at first I kind of had respect for the guy because I mean, like he's getting invaded, so he has to be strong. I get it. But now it's like this is getting weird because this guy is like he's acting like a celebrity. There's no sense of like there's no sense of him trying to say we need to find a solution to this war because a lot of our young men are dying, and you know, if we have to give up like half of our country, I guess, like who cares? At least we'll be alive, you know. But that's the thing. There's like this extreme, like the political establishment in Ukraine is very right wing. I mean, they're fucking Nazis. Like, how many videos now have been coming out from like CNN or some other mainstream media, and like they literally have like the black sun insignia, like is a very obvious like Nazi symbol, and like this is like there's so many videos of this shit. And like these are like Western Ukrainians who were Nazi sympathizers who were openly celebrating Nazi collaborators, like all kinds of swastika shit, like this, like these are actual Nazis. Like I'm not saying that to attack them; they're really serious actual Nazis, and it's just crazy that what we're dealing with. Crazy. So you know, there's you know, this idea that like Ukraine is actually winning in this war is not true. Like they're slowly being ground down. So, you know, in the opening stages of the war, when Russia was attempting to do like a lightning offensive to just, they wanted to hit Kiev, and they wanted to, you know, send these paratroopers, they wanted to send these tanks in. They were very clearly unprepared because this is not a conflict that you can just bulldoze through. So yeah, in that sense, in the first stages of the war, when Russia was trying to do this quickly because they didn't want to get bogged down in a conventional conflict, yeah, they embarrassed themselves, and people thought, oh, okay, well, they ain't shit, you know. But in this eastern front, in places like Donbass, places like Melitopol, like they pulled back from Kherson so they could get behind the Dnieper River, so they got behind that, but. So, you know, there have been some concessions where like the Russians are like, okay, we can't hold this, so they're going to retreat. But otherwise, the eastern holdings in Donbass and, you know, like Crimea, that area is still firmly under their control. And like Ukraine isn't, they can't dislodge them. They're just not capable of doing it. They don't have the means to do it. You know, they're going to get some German and U.S. tanks, you know, M1 Abrams, some Leopards. But that's not really going to fix anything. I don't think that's not going to fix anything. They're just going to have to keep sending them more tanks and more munitions, missiles and guns and shit. Like I've seen some people saying now, like, no, we have to give them Patriot missiles so that they can strike into Russia. And it's like, are you out of your mind? Like you're just escalating this. So, you know, that's the thing, man. Like, you know, if you're the person that's saying there needs to be peace talk, and chances are Ukraine is going to have to give up some land because they can't get it back. They're not in a position to win it back. So it's just like you know, yes, in a perfect world, it would be nice if Russia could give this land back, but Ukraine can't take it back. So then, yeah, it means nothing to tell it. It means nothing to tell the Russians give back this land if there's no ability to enforce that demand. So, yeah, you know. That's what's just happening. And currently there's this current battle in Bakhmut, which is you know, it's basically like the main focal point right now. And actually what's happening is that the city is slowly being encircled by the Russians, and Ukrainians are retreating from that. So that's going to fall. Bakhmut's going to fall. And what's also happening is like I think within like, some reports are saying like 20 miles of Zaporizhzhia. In, you know, Zaporizhzhia, if you look on the map, Zaporizhzhia is right on the Dnieper River, and that is like a key stronghold. Like seriously, if the Russians take Zaporizhzhia, the war is done. Like that's pretty much it. Like this is like outside of Kiev, the biggest city in Ukraine, and this is pretty much like a Stalingrad situation, because Stalingrad had like the Volga River, Of course, we just had like the 80th anniversary of Stalingrad, but this Zaporizhia, if a battle does come to pass, a siege or a battle comes to pass in Zaporizhia, is going to be really ugly. It's going to be very ugly, urban street-to-street fighting, and chances are, if Russia takes that city, it's pretty much done. Like, the war is done. Like, because then they can just pretty much cross over the river, and yeah, there's all sorts of things that they can do. But yeah, man, this war is now actually just starting to roll around the 1 year anniversary, like the 28th, the later part of February. So it's about to be the 1 year anniversary. People thought that this war would be done in like 6 months. Like, they thought that it's not going to happen. It's going to continue for a while because Russia's going to take it all, it seems. If there's no diplomatic talks to at least cede off the eastern territories that are primarily like Russian speaking, if there's no talks to, at least cut up the territories, Russia's going to take it all. Which, from Russia's perspective, this is a Nazi government, which it is. It is a Nazi government and a Western-backed government. And again, Ukraine has this idea that they're going to be a part of NATO. They're never going to be a part of NATO. They don't want the U.S., the West does not want Ukraine in NATO because, that would be too obvious. So they just want to keep sending them weapons and that's it. But they're not going to let them in NATO. It's never going to happen. Yeah, so, yeah, man. It's just like, people don't honestly believe that, like, the U.S. is taking advantage of Ukraine. Like, they think that we have their best interests in heart, but, like, NATO and the U.S. doesn't. Like, they're very clearly going to take advantage of the situation and send them weapons and whatever, make some money. And, and that's it. And slowly but steadily, more and more Ukrainians are going to get killed. Yeah, man, I've seen a lot of videos where there's like trenches and, the Russians take it over and there's just dead bodies everywhere. And it's really sad. It's like really young men being killed in this conflict. And there's still like no talk of peace, no attempt to find a solution to this. Because the Ukrainians are just going to be straight up like, they're just going to be hard-headed and they're going to say, no, we just want Russia out. And it's like, but you can't enforce that demand. Like, it means nothing to say, we want Russia out if you cannot enforce that. Like, you're not in a position to enforce those demands. So eventually it's going to get to a point where the U.S. is going to say, take this deal or we're no longer sending you weapons. That's really what's going to happen. And of course, the Ukrainians are going to get upset. Oh, we were betrayed by the West. And this and that. It's going to be... Yeah, man, it's really silly. Yeah, now when I see like a Ukrainian flag, now I'm just kind of like, ugh. Like, it's very cringy. Because it's just like, no, you support a genocide of Ukraine. It's like, no, we just don't want nuclear war. It's just ridiculous. So, just want to talk at least from BBC just about this battle that's happening in Bakhmut and, this just ongoing war that's happening. So, yeah, and it's not just Bakhmut, there's other cities that are like being affected by this. So this is what this article highlights on. So reading from BBC, you're going to hear the term, quote, spring offensive a lot in the coming weeks of the war in Ukraine. In a traditional military sense, it's when armies look to generate momentum after using the poor winter conditions to replenish. It is true that the fighting has become more static during typically cold conditions. However, all signs seem to be pointing towards an upcoming Russian push. Moscow has mobilized hundreds of thousands more men, as well as increased its productions of weapons and ammunition. Kiev is expecting to see major attacks from the east and south as soon as the 24th of February, which would mark a year since the full-scale invasion. So, if Russia does launch another offensive, what will it try to take? And it's talking about the key cities that Russia might go for. So, first, Bakhmut. So Bakhmut, it's the eastern city which has been grabbing the headlines because of the endless conflicting claims over who controls it. For now, Kiev isn't hinting at a tactical retreat. It claims the Russians are suffering about 500 casualties per day as they stage relentless attacks. Ukraine reckons its own losses are not as high. Regular Russian forces appear to have replaced mercenaries from the Wagner group as they continue to surround the city. For now, Ukrainian troops are continuing to hold it. If or when the city falls, invading forces are expected to push towards the cities of Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. It could allow Moscow to capture the entire eastern Donetsk region, one of its official goals. But that would involve capturing more than 4,000 square miles in a period where Russia has been making minimal costly gains. The Ukrainians would have been seriously overpowered or taken by surprise. In a period where Russia has been making minimal costly gains, the Ukrainians would have to be seriously overpowered or taken by surprise. And I talk about another city, Vuhledar. After trying and failing last November, Russian forces have started launching attacks on the small town of Vuhledar, also in the Donetsk region. It sits on the southeastern curve of the current battlefield and is significant for Moscow for two reasons. Firstly, it's close to the only rail line linking the annexed Crimean Peninsula and Russian-controlled territories in the east. It's from Vuhledar that Ukrainian forces have been firing artillery at Russian supply trains. Vuhledar is like Bakhmut in that, for the Russians, it carries more symbolic than military significance. Ukraine is convinced Moscow is going to chase its two main goals as quickly as possible. Alongside capturing the whole of Donbass, Luhansk, and Donetsk regions, Russian President Vladimir Putin is thought to be looking to widen the land corridor he has seized between Crimea and Russia. The capture of Vuhledar would certainly go towards those, but it would be more valuable to the Kremlin in a propaganda sense. Military milestones help the Kremlin to justify its, quote, special military operation back in Russia, as well as appease critics. They also could provide President Putin with a political way out if he can keep hold of what he seizes. And then here's Zaporizhzhia they're talking on. Away from the Eastern Front, the conflict lines south of the city of Zaporizhzhia is another direction Kiev is worried about. The concern is that Russian forces could push north towards the towns of Orikhiv or Pokrovsk. I can't say those. If these were to happen, it would push back the firing position of long-range Ukrainian missiles, which can strike deep into the land corridor Russia controls further south. Given that American HIMARS, and that's like the multi-launch, high-intensity multi-artillery rockets. I think it's what it's called. So it's like those high cluster rocket attacks. So given that American HIMARS have been able to travel up to 80 kilometers, 50 miles, and are about to go up to 120 kilometers, the occupied cities of Melitopol and Tokmak are comfortably within Ukraine's range. Moscow is also wary of a Ukrainian advance here towards Melitopol. Kiev has talked about the importance of the city before, saying its liberation would allow Ukraine to cut off Russian supply routes to Crimea. However, Valery Valuzhny, the commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces, has also admitted his troops don't have the numbers or equipment for such an attack. So, yeah, they just don't have the ability to do it. And they've lost a lot of men. And the casualties in this war, like, they're upwards of like 200,000. They're projecting by between Russia and Crimea, it's like hundreds of thousands, like wounded, casualties, dead. Like, this is a bloody war. This is a really devastating war, and it's only going to continue because there's no peace talk. They don't want peace. They just want to keep sending weapons and escalating this war. And then this is something that is something that's escalating as well with China. It's just like, for whatever reason, the powers that be, they want a war, regardless of the fact that would be the end of like civilization. Like, they would prefer to play with the nuclear holocaust than have defeat. And I mean, like, they're saying this, like, a lot of the NATO officials are saying, like, if Ukraine falls, if Ukraine loses this war, it will be a devastating defeat for NATO, which is crazy. It's like, is NATO at war with Russia? Why would a war between Ukraine and Russia have such an effect for NATO? Because this is a proxy war for NATO to encircle Russia. That's ultimately what it is. It's crazy. It's crazy. The fact that NATO even existed after the collapse of the Soviet Union. They had it for the Soviet Union, and then the Soviet Union collapsed, and then now they found a new enemy in Russia, because that's what these military systems need. They always need an enemy, And of course, like, NATO can't, it's like NATO in the way they also trying to encircle China, but China isn't in the Atlantic. It's a North Atlantic Trade Organization, so it's just weird. Like, fuck NATO. Like, honestly, this is just crazy. So the fact that they don't want peace talks, because if they do, then that would make NATO look weak and it could disrupt the alliance. It's just like, no, we need to escalate this war and keep digging this hole and keep giving them weapons and arms. I mean, from the perspective of Russia, we're already at war. Like, they're not, that's the thing. Like, people get stuck with this legal mindset of well, we're legally not at war, but no, we're at war. This is what it is. This is the logical conclusion of these policies. We're escalating a war. So, yeah. And then, I'm talking about China and Russia, and now there's another aspect that's happening, which includes Iran and Israel. So recently there were some bombings in Israel, or bombings in Iran that are suspected to be with Israel, and Israel also bombs Gaza. They are also bombing Syria. This is fucking crazy, just how much of a rogue state Israel is. But they're never held accountable. Israel can do whatever they want and bomb whoever they want, because they have to protect our land and we have to protect our people, and it's crazy. So I'm reading from Reuters just about these bombings that have been happening in Iran, particularly against drone facilities. So this is just there are drone attacks against military factories that are developing drones, and these drones have been in use in Ukraine. So they were suspected that this is kind of linked to that as well. But this is what Reuters is saying. So Israel appears to have been behind an overnight drone attack on a military factory in Iran, a U.S. official said on Sunday. Iran claimed to have intercepted drones that struck a military industry target near the central city of Isfahan, and said that there were no casualties or serious damage. The extent of damage could not be independently ascertained. Iranian state media released footage showing a flash in the sky and emergency vehicles at the scene. A spokesperson for the Israeli military declined to comment. Arch foe Israel has long said it is willing to strike Iranian targets if diplomacy fails to curb Tehran's nuclear missile programs, but has the policy of withholding comment on specific incidents. Pentagon spokesperson Brigadier General Patrick Ryder said no U.S. military forces were involved in strikes in Iran, but declined to comment further. That U.S. officials were pointing to an Israeli role in the attacks was first reported by the Wall Street Journal, citing several unidentified sources. One U.S. official, speaking on condition of anonymity, told Reuters it did appear that Israel was involved. Several other U.S. officials declined to comment, beyond saying that Washington played no role. Tehran did not formally ascribe blame for what the Foreign Minister Hossein Amirabdollahian called a cowardly attack aimed at creating insecurity in Iran, but state TV broadcasts comment by lawmaker Hossein Mirzai saying there was strong speculation Israel was behind it. The attack came amid tensions between Iran and the West over Tehran's nuclear activity and its supply of arms, including long-range suicide drones for Russia's war in Ukraine, as well as months of anti-government demonstrations at home. The extent of the damage could not be independently confirmed. Iran's defense ministry said the explosion caused only minor damage and no casualties. Quote, such actions will not impact our experts' determination to progress in our peaceful nuclear work, that was told to reporters in televised remarks. An Israeli strike on Iran would be the first under Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu since he returned to office last month at the helm of the most right-wing government in Israeli history. In Ukraine, which accuses Iran of supplying hundreds of drones to Ukraine to attack civilian targets in Ukrainian cities far from the front, a senior aide to President Volodymyr Zelensky linked the incident directly to the war there. Quote, explosive night in Iran, Mikhailo Podolyak tweeted, did warn you. Iran has acknowledged sending drones to Russia, but says they were sent before Moscow's invasion of Ukraine last year, Moscow denies its forces use Iranian drones in Ukraine, although many have been shot down or recovered there. So, yeah, there's a multitude of things here. And of course, Iran, they're just being bombed indiscriminately. Like, there's been all kinds of bombings and assassinations by Israeli agents in Iran, and even under the Trump administration, Israel was really close to an airstrike against Iran, and Trump had to actually intervene there. It's just crazy how off the cuff Israel is, and they just get to do whatever, and it's just crazy. And they're bombing Syria, they're bombing Iran. Israel's a rogue state. It really is. It's a rogue state. It's the how do I say this? The attack dog of the U.S. And of course, if you make any kind of critical comment against Israel, you're anti-Semitic. It's just ridiculous. Just any sort of hey, maybe Israel shouldn't just bomb countries just on a whim. Maybe the reason why so many countries hate Israel and actively attack Israel is because Israel attacks without question. It's just crazy, man. And man, it's just, we're watching all of this unfolding. Israel now, of course, they're saying has the most right-wing government in its history, and that's not a good sign. There's actually I was reading this one genocide watchdog saying how Israeli society is really primed for genocide, and of course there's apartheid of Palestinians. And I'm reading this other article from BBC about just how this UN envoy is talking about how we're really reaching a really violent point in this hit conflict, and Israel, of course, is just making all kinds of attacks against Palestinian communities, and they bulldoze people's homes down. They just kill people. They're shooting children. They shoot these people are evil, man. Really, and it doesn't matter to me that they're Jewish. No, who fucking cares? You're gonna tell me you're gonna look at these videos of these soldiers, soldiers shooting at children playing soccer, or just arresting them because this kid said some stupid shit, and now oh well, he's a domestic terrorist, and it's oh no, but you see, because we have to support Israel. Oh, it's I don't give a shit that they're Jewish, okay? You're gonna shoot people, you're gonna shoot children, and then oh no, I'm Jewish, so that makes it okay for me to do that. Fuck you, man. And then also they've also been showing videos of the Israeli state, the police, they're attacking anti-Zionist rabbis. So here's the thing about Judaism, because it's not a monolith. It's not there's no pope of the Jewish faith. As from my understanding, there are patriarchs, but there's not a Jewish pope. This is actually kind of funny to say that, but it's this Zionist movement is not really the mainstream for Judaism. Now, it's a pretty sizable portion of it. It is, but there's also other Jews, other rabbis who say that this is sacrilegious, the idea of a Jewish state, a homeland, is this is sacrilegious, and it doesn't go against, it goes against our values. And so, I mean, there's very much a theological debate that's happening within the Jewish, scholarly community, within the rabbis and other, Jewish theological experts, So this is it's not a one thing where it's all Jews have to support Israel. Of course, the Zionists think that, but there are also there's also a pretty sizable anti-Zionist movement. And again, it's I'm a history major. I've studied the history of Zionism, of the colonial attitudes within Israel. I mean, literally, Israel only exists because of the British mandate, right? After World War One, and then that just escalated from there. And then, of course, these people, I shouldn't say these people, the Zionists, they're so big on the ancient history, our blood right to this land, and then it's just it's hey, you know how many times Hebrews and the Jews came to these areas and killed the people, the Canaans, right, who were living there. Like, come on, man. Like, dude. Hey, I don't see any of these Zionists, like, getting mad at Italy, right? Because it was the Romans who expelled them. So, like, I don't see anybody demanding reparations. They're all about their ancient blood right and their heritage and such. But for some reason, they want to attack, like, this group that just so happened to live on this land. Which, like, I also read some other reports on, like, basically, like, the genetic history of Palestinians. And they're literally, like, the same people who were Jewish, and then, of course, the Muslims, conquered those lands, and then they just converted to Islam. So it's literally like the same thing. Like, there are Palestinian Jews who get discriminated because they're Palestinian. they're like, yeah, it's just crazy. Like, this is crazy, man. Crazy time. This is very obviously like a racial, like, ethno state. Like, these are like the same, like, principles that we see in Nazi Germany. Like, this is the same, like, blood right sort of talking. It's the same attitude. It's colonialism. So yeah, man, crazy. And I know some younger people, because I have some extended family members who are Jewish, and they're younger. So of course I don't talk about this subject matter, but it gets me really, like, concerned about when they start getting older, like, what political views they're gonna hold. Because, like, again, man, it's just like, this is bad. Like, you don't have to, like, tell me. Like, all I need to see is a video of these soldiers, like, arresting, beating a kid because he's just Palestinian. And then you're going to tell me, no, you see, because this is just the thing that has to happen because the Palestinians, they're the ones who are being violent. But, like, all these videos of, like, cops and soldiers shooting kids, like, no, it's the Palestinians' fault. They're the ones launching rockets and such. Hey, maybe because you kicked them off their land and massacred their people. Maybe that's why they want to kill you. So it's, yeah, crazy. I mean, this is like one of those things that, like, it's never going to end. It's never going to end. And of course, the Israelis now, they're really getting on this. They're becoming very violent, and their language is becoming, like, straight up genocidal. And this is what this UN envoy will talk up on in this article. So this is from the BBC. So the UN envoy in Jerusalem has warned that surging violence in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories has brought the situation to the brink. In a BBC interview, Tor Winnisland called for a firm diplomatic intervention to stem the bloodshed. He also warned of further deterioration due to declining international support for the Palestinian Authority. Quote, "The UN cannot take over this responsibility. We cannot govern Palestine," he said. In the last month, more than 35 Palestinians and several Israelis have been killed following a year of spiraling violence involving near nightly Israeli military search and arrest raids and a spat of Palestinian attacks. It comes with the most radically nationalist government in Israel's history now in power, which has declared the principle of exclusive Jewish rights to all of the land. Meanwhile, a crisis-gripped PA, Palestinian Authority, which governs to a limited extent parts of the West Bank, has been losing control of the cities of Jenin and Nablus to a new generation of armed militants. Many observers fear a final demise of prospects for a so-called two-state solution, the long-standing international formula for peace. Mr. Winnisland is the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, a post created during the breakthrough of Oslo agreements in the 1990s, and now sees him frequently shuttling between Israeli, Palestinian, and regional officials, trying to de-escalate crises and violent flare-ups, while hopes of a longer-term peace are moribund. Mr. Winnisland accepted there were difficult diplomatic conditions given the, quote, political situation on the Israeli side and a complicated situation with Palestinian leadership. But the envoy dismissed the suggestion that the peace process was dead. Quote, "Whatever government we have in Israel, whatever authority we have in Ramallah, this is the point of departure where this discussion needs to take place," he said. Quote, "We are very well aware of the agreements made in the formation of the Israeli government. Diplomacy cannot stop there." Quote, "The engagement we have seen over the last days and weeks is very good. It's high time, and maybe it's even a little bit late. We should have started before." International efforts towards a long-term solution have been stalled for nearly a decade. The Trump administration put forward a plan, now abandoned, which would have seen Palestinians given municipal control of pockets of the West Bank, along with the Gaza Strip, with Israel given full security control. The fallout from the plan's announcement sparked violence on the ground, and so the Palestinians cut off nearly all ties with the U.S. Meanwhile, human rights groups increasingly call on the international community to acknowledge a one-state reality for Palestinians living under Israel's military occupation, now into its 56th year. Mr. Winnisland's interview with the BBC follows this week's visit to the region by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who called for a rapid de-escalation in violence. The UN envoy said there was now active diplomacy involving the Americans, the UN, and Israeli and Palestinian officials. Asked whether this would lead to fewer military raids or a restoration of PA control in parts of the West Bank, he said, quote, "The American side is in very specific discussions with the Israelis. Quote, there are plans that can be rolled out, so these paradigms may change. And I said there needs to be a space for the Palestinian security forces to operate. Quote, the key factor here is that the parties are not nursing their unilateral decisions if we are going to keep the situation under control," he said. He called on Israel to firmly deal with the issue of expansion of Israeli settlements and settler violence in the West Bank. He also said that Palestinian security forces need to be able to gain control in the cities of Jenin and Nablus. He urged a full resumption of so-called security coordination between Israel and the PA, which President Mahmoud Abbas last week announced he was canceling. Quote, there are contacts, but we just had a discussion with the Palestinians on this yesterday. It is not happening in the way it has happened before. They have formally stopped it. It needs to get going again, he said. So there's just a lot to focus on here. Again, it's just like there's just a breakdown that's happening. And of course, we're dealing with, a very right-wing government in Israel that has no intention of peace. They just very clearly want to escalate this violence. Of course, like this diplomat, he said they need to get control of these settlers in the West Bank. This, by international law, these illegal settlements that are taking over the West Bank, and Israel is not going to accept that. This is never going to happen. They're not going to do that. I mean, like these soldiers, like they're out there protecting the settlers as these settlers are harassing Palestinian farmers. Like they're straight up like going into like these orchards, like they have olive tree orchards, and like they kill all the trees, and the soldiers are there protecting them. Like this is very clearly like a very evil country. So people who are openly supporting this, like, this Jewish homeland. And again, this idea that like it's an ethno state, okay? So it's not like Jews can live there, okay? And they were living there before Israel, like they were living fine. And then, of course, the Zionists came through with the support of the West and just ruined everything. And now, of course, now because of what these Jews and the Zionists have done in Israel against the Palestinians, chances are now there's going to be no solution for coexistence because the Zionists have ruined everything and they created all this violence. Like this is going to take generations to heal. And of course, like it doesn't seem like it's possible because like they've just committed so much violence. I mean, you have the Nakba and all these stories that come out of like massacres, and like there was like this movie that came out by the name of Farah, and it follows like a young girl during this experience of the Israel committing this violence and massacres, and like it's like, yeah, man, like this is what they're about. And like, of course, the Israelis were like, no, you can't show this movie. Yeah, man, this is what they're about, man. Of course, it's become more mainstream now to criticize Israel. I mean, like, it's just so obvious the violence that they're committing. It's so obvious. Like, you can't hide it anymore. And of course, like, no, but you see, because the Palestinians, they're launching rockets, and do you support Hamas? Do you support Hezbollah? Like that's what it gets to, where it's like, oh, so I guess you want all Israelis to die. I guess you just want the Holocaust in Israel. Like, that's what it gets to. And, like, of course, they're actively ignoring the very real oppression of Palestinians, like children being shot. Like, this happens all the time. They killed Shireen Abu Akleh. Like, they killed her. And, like, dude, like, these people are evil. Like, this is Israel, and this is what they are. This is evil, and this is what the U.S. foreign policy has created in Israel. And, like, this is the weird thing, too, because, like, it's not even geopolitical, because a lot of these supporters of Israel in the U.S., they have this weird, like, doomsday, like, cult idea for, like, the return of Jesus, because it's some weird prophecy with Tel Megiddo and Armageddon. It's like, this is what I fucking mean about these Christians in power, man. They're fucking insane. My goodness. Like, to them, the idea of the end of the world is like, they welcome that because they're going to be saved and the rapture. And, oh no, Jesus is going to take us to the promised land. And it's like, these people are actively, like, planning for the end of the world. Like, they're actively, like, bringing it, creating those conditions. That's what they want. It's weird. It is so weird. But this is what we're dealing with. This is the situation that we're having to live with. Like, this conflict in Israel and Palestine, because there's no peace talk. Israel doesn't want peace. Of course, like, they always want an adversary to justify this, like, militarized state that they live in. You know, like, they're bombing. They bombed Iran, and they've also been bombing Syria. It's crazy. Like, they're a rogue state, but because they have the U.S. support, there's no accountability. And then, of course, if Iran or Syria retaliates, then the U.S. is going to come in to support Israel unconditionally. Like, dude, like, this is going to get bad. There's going to be another intifada. Like, there's going to be, like, real, like, race riots and, like, massacres that are going to happen. Like, this is an actual genocide that's going to happen. And, of course, like, Israel's just going to get away with it. So that's what's been happening. So that's, of course, the international segment that I touched upon. And there's some other natural disasters, the weather events, natural phenomenon to highlight on. And so we've been dealing with a lot of weather events in the U.S. recently. And, of course, namely, I wanted to talk about this, I guess they call it an atmospheric river. So this precipitation, this deluge of rain in California that's been happening. Like, trillions of gallons of rain have been falling on the state. And this has been pretty devastating. And it's crazy because, like, not too long ago, they were dealing with forest fires, and wildfires, and then now it's all rain. And the thing about it too is that these areas that have been affected by the forest fires, it makes it so that when the rain comes, the soil doesn't retain it. Especially in, like, California is a very hilly, mountainous state, so they have all this rainwater that is not, like, retaining in the soil, and it causes these mudslides. So there's, like, all this, like, it's terrible damage. Like, I'll be talking about the cost that they're estimating now, because, like, it's, like, in the billions. And yeah, as I said, trillions of gallons of water dropped on the state, just flooding, historic flooding in the state. Also, like, all the snow in the mountains, like, they're talking about, and that's another thing too, because they have all the snow, and that's going to be more melt and more flooding from that. In a way, like, there's, like, the silver lining in that, like, this drought that they've been dealing with, a mega drought that they've been dealing with, it might replenish their reservoirs and their water tables and such. But of course, it's like with all these other weather events, it's like, oh, you get extreme heat, and then now you're going to get extreme cold and weather events and such, and rain, flooding. So that's what they had here. They just got the extreme. They were dealing with extreme heat, extreme drought. Now they're dealing with extreme flooding, extreme rain. And there's just a lot of damage. So I'm just reading from this flood list article talking about estimates of the damages and economic losses. So, right. So total U.S. economic losses from the flooding in California in January 2023 could reach 5 to 7 billion, according to Moody RMS, the global catastrophe risk modeling and solutions company. Moody RMS also highlighted the low number of households in California with flood insurance and the rising risk of flooding across the state. Quote, Nowhere is safe from flooding in California today. If we learn anything from this extreme rainfall and subsequent damage, it's that even perceived low-risk flood zones are still flood zones. If it rains, it can overflow. This estimate reflects inland flood impacts for the U.S. and includes damage to infrastructure. The insured losses are anticipated to be between $500 million to $1.5 billion, including losses to the National Flood Insurance Program and the private flood market. The overall economic losses estimate is based on an event reconstruction using the Moody's RMS U.S. Inland Flood HD model and reflects property damage, contents, and business interruption across residential, commercial, industrial, and automobile and infrastructure assets. A series of extratropical cyclones starting December 26, 2022 impacted the west coast of the U.S., which resulted in heavy rainfall, overtopped rivers, flash floods, levee breaches, mudslides, fallen trees, debris flows, heavy snow at high altitude, together with some wind damage. The rainfall associated with these extratropical cyclones was exacerbated by a band of high atmospheric water vapor, also known as an atmospheric river. The rainfall intensity in California was so extreme that several locations in Central California set new 3-week rainfall totals, and certain locations received their annual average rainfall totals in less than 1 month. This led to widespread flash floods and river overtopping. For example, water depths in the San Lorenzo River upstream of Santa Cruz rose by more than 16 feet in less than 8 hours. This was the highest recorded water depth for the San Lorenzo River since the records began some 85 years ago. So this is a pretty unprecedented rainfall. Records being broken. Again, they're saying like billions of gallons dropped in the state. I should say trillions, not billions. Trillions of gallons dropped. So this is a lot. And also talking how about some of these California households don't have flood insurance. So, they were like low risk areas and they didn't take out flood insurance, and now things are looking bad. And I see this map here. There's all kinds of landslides happening. Different reports on the rating, the water rainfall, precipitation, and of course, there's like the soil, unable to retain that water, so it's just running off. Literally, it's just on the surface. It's really bad. It's a really bad situation. So it's just crazy how you have extreme weather events. You have the bone dry heat. Just like the state is like a tinderbox. Like even like the slightest heat signature can start a fire, and billions of losses. Homes, entire communities being burned to the ground. And then now you got rainfall and mudslides and flooding, and it's just bad all around. And I've read other projections about future rainfall estimates. It's gonna get bad. They're projecting this is bad, but they're projecting even more biblical levels in the 2050s and the 2070s. It's just crazy reading all these different reports on projections and just how bad it's gonna get. And it's whoa, we are not ready for this. It's really disturbing. Texas already itself is one of the main states that experiences flooding. Which is why I'm kind of glad I live up in Huntsville. It's a little more elevated. There's more runoff, so the water doesn't hold itself there. Because when you're in Houston, Houston is just a bowl basically, and it has all these bayous in it. So there's all these bayous, all these levees. Of course, all the rain, all the water from upstream washes into the Houston area, Buffalo Bayou and such, and it just sits there. Especially considering that it's all concrete. The city is just all concrete, and hurricane season, Hurricane Harvey was bad. The city was just like an ocean. That's how bad it was, and And that itself broke all kinds of records in terms of precipitation and rainfall. And then California, they just had this rainstorm, and it's in waves. They're experiencing. I think they're going to experience another wave of this rainfall. So it just keeps coming. So, yeah, man. It's like, it's ridiculous. I keep thinking about like, oh, where am I going to move to so I don't experience like weather disasters and climate change, but like nowhere's going to be safe. You're going to go to some other state and it's going to be even another thing. So it's just like, this is a global issue. But anyway, that's something we're going to have to look at later on. But yeah, so, just finishing up here at least, talking about different events that have been happening. So, there's also this earthquake that occurred in Turkey and Syria, this 7.8 magnitude earthquake that happened, and this is devastating. Like some of the death tolls that have been estimated are as high as 20,000. This is like really bad. This is like apocalyptic, especially considering places like Syria, like they've just been able to like they've barely been able to repair after this civil war, and then like now they got this earthquake and all the repairs that they made, all these buildings have collapsed, and so they're like right back to this wasteland that they were living in. And Syria also is experiencing sanctions, which like all these different planes are, all these different rescue efforts that primarily go into Turkey, but there's also sanctions on Syria, which, I believe that they will lift some of them for the emergency response, but still, like, this is like a devastating disaster. And it's so scary about like earthquakes, how like sudden they are. It's just like, you're just minding your business. The people were just minding their business, and then boom, 7.5 magnitude earthquake or 7. Yeah, it's just crazy. Yeah, I'm just reading here. They're estimating death tolls of 20,000. Currently the official toll is 4,372 as of February 6th. It could be worse than that. Let me see what else, because I'm reading like this like a timeline sort of thing. So I'm trying to see if anything updated. Okay, well, yeah. I mean, they're anticipating like thousands dead. I mean, and like some of these buildings, like they'll be saving people from the rubble, and then like not even like a block away, another building will collapse like during an aftershock. Like, this is scary, which like starts to get me thinking about the building codes. I mean, this is like, I wouldn't expect them to have like the best building codes, but still, like, it's kind of crazy just how like these buildings have been collapsing. Okay, so I'm reading now. This is from more updated because it was like February 6th, but now I'm reading here. They're saying more than 7,900 people have been killed, tens of thousands injured after a magnitude 7.8 struck Turkey and Syria on Monday. Thousands of buildings collapsed in both countries, and aid agencies are particularly worried about the northwestern Syria, where more than 4 million people have been relying on humanitarian assistance. Freezing weather conditions are further endangering survivors and complicating rescue efforts, as more than 100 aftershocks have struck the region. The quake, one of the strongest to hit the region in more than 100 years, struck 23 kilometers east of Nurdagi in Turkey's Gaziantep province at a depth of 24.1 kilometers, the U.S. Geological Survey said. And what's also crazy too is that this earthquake, a 7.8 earthquake, which is very strong, it had such an effect on like the global tectonic like system that there were aftershocks felt in Buffalo, New York, like a 4.0 magnitude earthquake, which is really crazy to think about how like an earthquake across the planet can have such an effect like that. Like, I'm thinking back to like a time where I was like sleeping, and for whatever reason I kind of felt like these like low vibrations, like it was one of those situations where like I was in bed and I felt like I was moving, like when you're in a boat and there's like a wake and your boat kind of goes up and down, but it wasn't like really sudden, it was really subtle, but like I could feel it. It was like I thought at first I was like nauseous and like losing my balance, but like no, I was like, holy shit, like there's something happening. And then I actually looked up the geological survey. There was like a 4.0 earthquake in like Odessa, Texas. So yeah, it's like So there was something. I did feel something. So it's kind of just crazy how much of an effect it has. And of course, these these size, I forgot what they're called. These detectors, they detect like the most subtle like movements, like a hair, basically like if it, like a hair was moving, like they detect that. So they're very sensitive, and like, you could see like the wave of the energy, because that's what it is. It's like energy moving through the crust of their surface of the earth. So they could detect like the slightest like change due to this earthquake in Turkey. It's like that's how strong it was. And there's also like the that earthquake in Japan, that 9.0 earthquake, which were like, starting. I think we're getting close to it. It's like March 11th, I think, and that itself was strong enough. I think it was so strong that like it moved the axis of the planet. So like, yeah, it's pretty. These earthquakes can have a severe effect for like the whole planet as a whole. So that's something to look out for. And yeah, that's just a terrible situation out there in Turkey and in Syria. So yeah. Before I wrap up, I at least want to talk about this other issue happening with, because I've been talking about COVID and threats of pandemics, but now we're also experiencing threats of the bird flu, and just about how this bird flu epidemic has been jumping now between mammals. It's been jumping between otters and seals. They're saying grizzly bears as well, and there's also saying that like this pandemic had the effect of, because there was recently talking about like this egg crisis, because they had to cull like millions of chickens, and then egg prices rose because of it. So like this this threat of the bird flu mutating to infect humans, although they're saying that like it's going to take a lot for it to mutate, it's still a potential threat. And once that happens, once it becomes human contagion, oh man, say your prayers. That's all I got to say there. So, yeah, I just want to at least touch up on this. So, I'm reading from Science Alert, and they're talking about the threat of a pandemic. So, 2 recent larger scale infections have raised concerns that bird flu has the potential to spread between mammals. One was an outbreak of H5N1 with the PB2 mutation at a Spanish farm in October that led to the culling of more than 50,000 minks. Research published in the journal Eurosurveillance last month said its findings, quote, indicate that an onward transmission of the virus to other minks may have taken place in the affected farm. End quote. Transmission between the minks has not been confirmed, with further research ongoing. The mass death of 2,500 endangered seals along Russia's Caspian Sea coast last month also raised concern. A researcher at Russia's Dagestan State University said last week that early samples from the seals tested positive for bird flu, adding that they were still studying whether the virus could cause the die-off. Peacock warned there have been mixed reports from Russia about the seals, which could have contracted the virus by eating infected seabirds. But if the seals did give bird flu to each other, it, quote, would be yet another very concerning development, he added. Quote, the mink outbreak, the increased numbers of infections of scavenger mammals, and the potential seal outbreak would all point to this virus having the potential to cause a pandemic in humans, he said. So, yeah, it's already coming to mammals, especially like colony mammals. They're also saying now it's affecting penguins, so this is scary. And, it's only a matter of time before it makes that jump, and God help us, because, again, you're going to see the same response, people thinking, oh, well, you see, it's just the flu. It's just the bird flu. I mean, how much harm could it cause? And then, like, millions of people are going to die, especially now that a lot of people are dealing with long COVID, and their immune systems are compromised. Yeah, man, so this is scary, and it's only a matter of time. So, we'll be here to follow that. I'm just going to have to report it when it happens, but hey, this is just what we're just here for the ride, right? So, I at least appreciate the, listening in on this show. I do talk up a lot of times, and I just want to at least say thank you. But we're just gonna have to follow things as they unfold, and of course, just hang in there. Right? We got bird flu, the threat of bird flu, nuclear holocaust, and escalation there. Yeah, man, great things are happening. But I will at least be here to report on it and follow it as it unfolds, and we're just gonna have to see what happens. So at the very least, I appreciate you listening in. I did talk at length today, but there's been a lot to touch up on, so at least I'll have something for y'all to listen to. I appreciate y'all listening in. Check out my YouTube, my Patreon for early access. This is the public 48-hour release, but I appreciate y'all listening in. And have a great rest of your day, evening, wherever time you're listening, and love you all. Thank you.